Let's start with Mark over there. Mark, why don't you officially introduce yourself?
Mark Manellis, Planning Commissioner.
Okay.
There you go, Pat.
Keith, why don't you go?
Keith Lyden, I've been the city planner for a while.
Okay.
Lori Beatty, Planning Commission. Carol Bellows, Planning.
I'm Jan Tyso, Planning.
Brand new, and thank you for coming.
Brand new.
Yes.
This is my first,
You'll know a lot more about us at the end of this, okay?
Peter Weston, the city attorney.
Mike Weston, I'm the city manager.
Ronnie Smith, city recorder.
Shauna Thompson, city councilor.
Kate Moore, city councilor.
Ken Dixon, mayor.
Jamie Fender, council president.
Dave Platt, councilor.
Okay. Now we are official. So before we get started with the first presentation, which is going to be by Peter, who's going to tell us what we can and cannot do in this work session environment?
Okay, starting here.
Okay.
Chime in. So essentially a work session is basically a regular meeting. It's open to the public, it's recorded. We are subject to all the public disclosure laws from the work session. We do not take any sort of testimony from the public in a work session. This is our chance to work together, to hash out things and try to figure out what we're working on, what we're doing, learn, kind of the trades of the, or tools of the trade, and carry on. Also in a work session, we cannot do any motions, we cannot make any motions, vote on anything. This is basically an educational platform and an opportunity to actually work on things. So that's my interpretation. Peter, you want to refine that at all? Or?
Sure. I mean, this is an opportunity for kind of the city council and the planning commission to kind of share a vision, to come up with how you guys are going to work together. The city council has a wide variety of tasks in running the city, and the planning commission is far more narrow, and it's a focus on land use and development, and kind of carrying out the vision and the values of the city council as King City continues to grow and as more people move here. And it's just the planning commission fills a very specific kind of set of criteria, set of decisions that you all make. And usually it's really important just that you hear from the city council as you kind of learn of what their vision and values are for the place and for the future. And hopefully those visions become aligned and the planning commission's kind of able to carry out that work. So hopefully things don't get to the city council. There's some things that the planning commission gets to take care of, and hopefully there's no appeal. Because kind of everyone's on the same page. There are instances where it needs to go to the city council or there is an appeal to the city council. And understanding kind of the roles of each body and understanding kind of that shared vision of the community and how the city's going to grow helps make sure that those vision and values are aligned. So I think that workshops are really important so that people can get on the same page and kind of plan for growth. And kind of segueing into the next, I'm not smarter than anyone here in the room, but I have been through a couple of urban growth boundary expansions, and one of the things that I learned is that a lot of what happens is kind of counterintuitive. So you expect that if a large amount of acreage is coming into the city, that certain things will happen and certain people will be impacted perhaps negatively or positively. I mean, with any growth, there are both benefits and burdens. And it's important to acknowledge that up front. But what I have learned is that kind of some of the assumptions that you make aren't necessarily true. And so as we prepare for what is going to be a significant growth for the city, and that you're about doubling in size, I think it's important that the various stakeholders understand some of the impacts, both positive and negative. And then as we think about kind of the vision of King City, as I understand it, over the past 20 years plus, King City's really been a place of inclusion, a place where, a welcoming place where a lot of people were able to move. There's a lot of, if you look at your census data, particularly comparing 2000 to the data we're going to get, and Mike and the mayor and I have kind of been through that. What it demonstrates is a lot more diversity via, diversity in age, diversity in race, diversity in income, kind of that wide swath of people. And I think one of the reasons that you got this urban growth boundary expansion, which really is kind of unprecedented for Metro to say that a city can double up in size, is because of that vision of creating a place for people and a welcoming place. And I think that, that was what kind of the narrative and what the data demonstrated was really that broad socioeconomic group, growing racial diversity, growing age diversity, all those things. And it's really represented on your council and on the boards in the city and just at city events as well. So I think that part of what we're going to talk about is the past 20 years, kind of how we got to here, which was through a couple of urban growth boundary expansions, and then kind of the next one and what that could mean. In the past, and I hate to even say this because I feel like we're jinxing ourselves, but we haven't even had a LUBA appeal. King City has been very in favor of responsible growth. And if you look at your housing density per square mile as compared to the city of Portland, your housing density per square mile is actually 30% higher than the city of Portland's. So it's been a place where you have single family homes, where you have townhomes, where you have condos, where you have apartments, all together in the same mix, which if you kind of look at how an urban planner would, in today's, when Metro and others talk about what something should look like, which is that full inclusion, I smile and say you're talking about King City, because really they are. That's kind of how you've grown in the past and how you may grow in the future. So that's what I've got.
Yeah. And that's important. The way you describe King City is what House Bill 2001, 2003 is really based on. That kind of mix that they're looking for in other cities. We already have it, basically, and we really defined it well within our concept plan, to meet all those different housing needs and different incomes. So sometimes I would tease the other mayors and say that really that bill was based on King City. They don't believe it, but I don't hesitate to tell them.
It was based on our example, not for us, right? Not in response to others.
Absolutely.
So I think as we go through the agenda here today, our first item is going through some of the growth and the challenges in growth and some of the costs associated with that. We have Peter here who's going to kind of talk about some of those things. We have an opportunity to dive into where we're at in some of the planning processes and just kind of give you a brief overview of kind of how this shakes out and how we end up getting to a final format and kind of lay out kind of your timeline ahead of you so you understand what's coming and some of the challenges that you as planning commissioners or city council members are going to be facing. I'm sure many of you have already been bombarded by a number of these things. I know personally, with the emails, with all the letters and everything else that I personally am getting, I'm sure that you two are probably getting them as well. So I would just encourage you to hang in there because it's a long process and this is just the beginning. So Peter, I'll let you take it away.
And
sure.
Also, Mike, as we dive into this, one of the things that's a hot button right now, of course, is the effort, the petition to stop the Fisher Road extension. And we really need to have some conversation on that and, really what that means and what are we going to do in response to it. There's some things in it that we need to discuss as a team so that we are all on the same page about what's being said in the petition and the accuracy of it, and what do we do in order to make sure that people understand that there's no smoke and mirrors in what we're doing. We're talking about what's real and very specific to the kinds of things that we want to see happen. So we will talk about that today too.
So a lot of what I learned about planning and infrastructure and both the benefits and the burdens of growth comes from my time as city attorney for the city of Damascus, which is no longer a city.
Oh, what a great example that
Right, I got to surrender their charter. Right, so, but I think we had seven different comprehensive plans, and we spent a huge amount of time discussing infrastructure. And when people talk about Damascus and why it didn't work, and it didn't, it's no longer a city. Part of the reason is because from the topography and from the slopes and providing water and sewer and all of that, it was just hugely expensive. And so it had a lot of slope. There were a lot of other reasons why, when we actually looked at the numbers, particularly for eastern Damascus, the cost of building it out was going to be just so significantly high that it wasn't palatable to people. And that's really when everything fell apart. And if you look at it now, what Happy Valley, who's the neighbor to the west is, will essentially annex to 2/3 of Damascus, which is kind of the flatter area, and beyond that they wouldn't. And the reason is because the cost of urbanizing that other area was so high that it would make the rest cost prohibitive. And fortunately, we don't have that problem in your urban growth expansion area, but we do have opportunities for savings. And the reason that we would want to do savings is because the way that growth is paid for in large part, unless the federal government or state government puts in a bunch of money, which in the last few decades they haven't, is through system development charges. And so system development charges is the way that growth pays for itself. And so you'll see them for streets, you'll see them for water, sewer, parks, trails, all of those things. And the less expensive the infrastructure is, the lower our SDCs can be. And if you look at housing affordability, there are really only three factors kind of that dictate how expensive the end products are. The one is the cost of the dirt. And I wish we could control that, but we can't. And what we're seeing in the expansion area is explosive growth per acre. At one point I was aware that things were going for $500,000 an acre. And what I've heard now is that it's between $1 million and $1.5 million an acre.
Wow.
So we're talking about a significant expense, and that does impact what end developers can build, because obviously they're trying to make a profit as well. So the cost of the dirt, the cost of the system development charges are really the two largest factors in kind of the end product and how expensive that is. The third is building materials, and if you've watched the news, you've probably heard that wood is getting more expensive, other things are getting more expensive. Traditionally, that's gone with inflation, though. It's been pretty stable. Where you have the two biggest opportunities for things to be lower or higher cost are in those system development charges, which in some communities are as low as like $15,000 per unit. In some communities are over $55,000 per unit. So there can be a wide variety depending on their studies and the factors, particularly topography. So as we're looking at kind of that infrastructure, so when I say infrastructure, I mean streets, I mean sewers, I mean water. Part of what we would want to do is to have kind of the lowest cost solution. So if there's a road that we can push through for $5 million or a road for $30 million, then the $5 million, not just for the city, but as far as maintaining affordability, that makes a lot more sense. One of the things that I think is really counterintuitive for people, and I'm aware of some of the opposition that you guys have been hearing, and people that are opposed to streets in some locations and suggesting streets in others. If we could go to the next slide that shows kind of the aerial.
Want the bigger one?
Yeah, the bigger one would be great. So obviously we have a pretty dense urban core, and then is there any way to zoom in on the kind of the Fisher Road and in the existing neighborhood adjacent to the Tualatin River? So one of the first things that I would anticipate when this comes into the urban growth boundary is that those homes along the Tualatin River would be required to hook up to sewer. Because right now they're on septic and or sand filtration, I'm not sure. I say that just based on other unincorporated areas on the Tualatin River, which are all on either septic, or when that drain field becomes compromised, they generally go to a sand filtration system. That's traditionally how it's been done. Now there's systems that are above ground. Those cost around $50,000, and so that's tough for some property owners. But one of the things that, if you look at kind of case law and urbanization and when areas come into cities, particularly adjacent to waterways, that is something that happens. Traditionally, it's been the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, who has required that. Keith, I know, is familiar with the Mid-County case in Multnomah County, where there were a lot of homes that were on septic and they were unincorporated. They were in between Portland and Gresham, and the legislature and others basically said, for health reasons, you're going to come into the city of Portland and you're going to hook up to sewer. There were a number of cases related to that. It went all the way to the Oregon Supreme Court, and ultimately they said, yeah, there's a public interest in that health and safety associated with hooking up people to sewer. So traditionally, if people are outside of the city and outside of an urban growth boundary, they're not on sewer. As soon as they come within the urban growth boundary, they will need to be hooked up to sewer. That is particularly true if you're on the Tualatin River or another river like the Willamette. The Tualatin was designated by Metro as a water trail for our region. And so they have a significant interest in that water being clean to the extent possible. And again, this is not based on this neighborhood specifically, but based on other neighborhoods adjacent to the Tualatin River. What you'll see during heavy rains is effluent going into the river, whether that's measured, what the dye package, where they put a dye package and flush it, or measuring the water quality both above and below. That's often what happens is during high rain events, that all goes into the river, and that's not something that people want. Of course, we want clean water. So I would expect that that is something that, whether it's Metro or the DEQ or the EPA, that would start. And why that impacts the street is because the further the sewer has to travel, the more expensive it is. So although those homeowners right now may be opposed to a road extension, I think, and they want the road to be far north of them, practically speaking, if that road were to be a logical extension of Fisher, what that would mean is we would be taking up that road in order to add the sort of amenities that you would see with a city street. And during that process, sewer could be added, which makes it far less expensive for them to connect to the sewer than if they were, than if the main connector were far north of them. Okay. And that's particularly true with the, one of the properties that will be most impacted by this is the Bankston property, actually, because if where the traditional road has been, and there is a road bed that goes kind of through that property, if that were to continue, then the cost of then connecting to sewer would be frankly minimal. If the connector's far north of them, then because of the amount of dirt between them and the other houses, they would bear the cost of bringing that sewer to their property. So it would be significantly more expensive for them to hook up. And people don't think about sewer, they don't necessarily think about water, but as we look at urban growth boundary expansions, that is those are two of the costs that really drive development. And so we're probably going to be able to get numbers so that they have a better understanding of the costs. That's probably not something that's at the top of their mind. It's not something I ever thought about until between Damascus and then Scappoose had a large urban growth boundary expansion that I've been dealing with for the last, a few years. So I think the other thing is that we need to have a really candid conversation about how growth and infrastructure has traditionally happened, and who has borne the brunt of that. And it's been low-income people and communities of color. And that is a difficult conversation to have, because I think it's something that we all wish hadn't happened. But if we look at whether it's I-405 or I-5, that and how urban renewal was used in Portland along Williams, I mean, that was a thriving, those were thriving businesses that were basically demolished for a hospital expansion that never happened. It didn't happen for decades. I-405 went through neighborhoods, I-5 went through neighborhoods, and neighborhoods were displaced. And oftentimes they've looked at what's the lowest cost area that we can push through if we're going to use eminent domain. What dirt is the cheapest dirt? And it was really difficult for me to kind of hear people saying that we should take our street through an existing manufactured housing park instead of along the street where streets are currently, because
The existing right of way, it's already there.
right. So basically, the message that's sending, whether it's intentional or not, is that people don't care about low-income folks. People don't care about that community. And if you look at those communities, they are a community. If people actually go into the manufactured housing parks in King City or in other areas around Washington County, what they see is a community and a place, and people that want to be there, that those are their neighbors. They care about each other, and obviously they don't want to be displaced. And so as we're looking at growth and the street infrastructure, part of what we're looking at is cost. And from that vantage point, we would not want to go through the manufactured housing park because there is no direct connectivity. It will be a circuitous route through the city. B, we would be displacing multiple homeowners, and the reason that people are suggesting that we do so is because those are people of modest means that perhaps don't have the ability to say no. I would hope that we can learn, the collective we can learn from our history and not make the same mistakes that we've made in the past. And so as we look at Fisher Road and where it can be most efficiently connected, and is there any way we can zoom in?
Not on this one.
Yeah, so if we can, so if we can look at Fisher Road, which
Go
is,
to that other map. You have the map that I gave there,
This
I
one?
think. Yeah, and then zoom in there, you can see topography a little
I don't know
better.
if I can zoom. Killed it.
We are still trying to figure out the technology here.
We haven't been able to use this room in
I know.
over a year and a half, so.
No, you're on.
It's like brand new.
So you can just give us a second.
so with Fisher Road, we have an existing roundabout, and then we have it dead ending to where the power lines are. So let's see if we can. Is there any way we can share this with the?
I wish.
I've
got the map
burned into my brain.
Yeah, I think we had, most of us do.
I didn't realize that Fisher Road had a turn in it, had a,
Yeah. it would be very helpful to have a map of
It
it.
Oh,
feels
like a
straight.
little, yeah.
Yeah. Feels great.
Alright,
Been driving it for 25 years.
So if we look at the existing Fisher Road in the alignment, the closest road, the closest existing road to it, which provides east-west connectivity, is Southwest Watson. And that would require a slight bend in the road. With Southwest Watson, if we were to connect there, those homes along there then would be able to easily hook up to sewer. And the Southwest River Lane roads that are east of that, again, that if the sewer trunked there, they would be able to connect as well. And again, that is something that I would expect, whether it's Metro or the EPA, and traditionally it's been the Environmental Protection Agency that's required those hookups, that's what would happen. If we're looking at Southwest River Lane, if that is the east-west connector, and you know that's something that people are looking at because it exists today, then there's some other factors that we would need to look at as far as where would that road bend. And there are a couple of options. One is that it would kind of maintain its natural course. There's some challenges with that because there's a conservation easement. I think most of you are probably familiar with that. To avoid that conservation easement, what we would likely need to do would be to bend that road. Is there any way we can get about it?
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
I'm
can
working
we
on
wait until the map comes
Yeah.
up? 'Cause I
Yeah,
think
the
it's too
conservation
difficult.
easement, is it for the river?
No, most of the property is-
private property.
Yeah, it's a,
Oh, okay, the conservation easement,
Mhm.
okay. I had,
Why don't you just pull up Google Maps?
yeah, Google Maps would be
Yeah.
great.
river said conservation easements.
Or Google Earth or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can really zoom in and kind of get some
Yeah.
terrain with those features.
Mm-hmm.
We'll take a quick pause and get that up so that we can really understand. Because I think the points that Peter is making is important for us all to understand.
I think it's also important to understand that it's often a misconception that, and it's easy to get focused on one east-west route. And throughout this area, we're probably talking about 4 or 5 east-west routes going through this area. So you have connections at Montague, connections at Fisher, connections at Capulet, and connections at Avenue B in the mobile home estates. So, and Beef Bench, so that's like 5 different east-west connections. And what we've seen is that the minute you provide any one of those connections, every car is going to funnel down to Fisher at some point in time. So it's like, they're all gonna be funneling down there. Now, we can have one connection, and that's gonna basically bottleneck everybody and funnel everybody down that one connection, or we can have a multitude of connections and kind of diffuse that load throughout the network. And so we've always talked about and looked at how we diffuse that load. So we diffuse that load by providing more outlets. More outlets mean that more people are scattered out all over the place. Like if everybody in Edgewater was forced to exit Fisher right now, you'd have 5,000 average daily trips coming out Fisher right now, based on the number of homes that are in there. So you've got probably 400 to 500 homes in Edgewater, and you figure 9 to 10 average daily trips per single family home.
Mike, you wanna mention, the additional work that, 3J is gonna be doing? Could we talk
Yeah,
about-
so also as part of the, one of the metro conditions, they were asking for alternative analyses, right? Like where our east-west alignments are gonna be. In our scoping with DKS, we had asked for that. Somehow, you know, through the ODOT scoping and everything else and the change of administrations there, somehow that got missed out of the ODOT scoping. And there was only a very small segment of their entire project budget toward that scoping. And so, you know, one of the things that Keith and I and others kept asking for is like, where's this alternative analysis? And when are we gonna get these data points? And when are we gonna get these traffic figures, which we still haven't gotten? But toward the end, they're like, well, we don't have it in our budget to do an elaborate alternative analysis on this. So we had to go to 3J and ask them to essentially develop the scope for this alternative analysis so that we could satisfy Metro in their request for analyzing these east-west collector alternatives. But so now but 3J basically has put together a scope. We have to submit it to Metro. Hopefully we get Metro's authorization to move forward with that scoping, and then we should be able to provide alternative analysis over the network and kind of dive a little deeper into what other alternatives there are besides the Fisher connection. It's easy for us to look at a map and say, well, obviously this is the easiest connection. But I think it's also important for us to really kind of crack down and listen and see and check out what the alternatives are and what those look like. So I think that's what this alternative analysis will look at. In the end, it might come down that Fisher's still our best option, has the least amount of property impacts, and probably is at the best elevation for combination of infrastructure services. And we've always talked about, if we do the Fisher one, we want to be able to deal with some of the erosion control matters that we have there, to deal with in-stream retention and sanitary and transportation at the same time. But the alternatives analysis will look at not only the transportation auto-related connections, but also active transportation connections and transit possible connections. We've always talked about doing like autonomous shuttles or autonomous transit throughout the city, and we've talked about doing an autonomous loop. So, in our concept plan, the autonomous loop was from the King City Plaza down Royalty Parkway to Fisher over to what would be River Terrace Boulevard, and then River Terrace Boulevard up to Beef Bend, and Beef Bend back over to 116th, and 116th back to the plaza. So that was always the autonomous loop that we were talking about for like interior transit circulation. So I think with transit, you kind of want to be within like a quarter to half a mile for walking distances to those stops. You figure the distance from Beef Bend to the Tualatin River is about half a mile. So if we have a stop in between there, we're within that last mile. So anyways, am I missing anything, Keith, or you wanna?
No, I think it's really just take a very comprehensive look at the connectivity through this whole area with some kind of more of a collector type connection that we've talked about in the concept plan and so forth. Where does that need to be? And then where do all these other streets need to be? And how would they function?
And I think this is important, for this next phase of analysis, is that if you just look at the conversation surrounding that comment that Fisher Road is going to have 8,000 to 10,000 vehicles a day if this extension occurs. And I think the confusion for a lot of us and the people who are in opposition is that 8,000 to 10,000 additional cars from what we see today, or is that the total that we'll see over a 20-year period? Because you just said it, that the number of cars that we're seeing today on Fisher Road going in and out of Edgewater is probably somewhere around 4,000 cars a day. We may not be talking about 8,000 to 10,000 additional trips. What we are talking about, it goes from 4,000 today, and over a 20-year period, it's going to get to 8 to 10. That's a
Maybe.
Maybe.
And that's like worst case scenario.
And I understand that, but I don't know that anybody understands they're not talking about additional trips necessarily, but they're talking about an increase from today to a number that could be the number 20 years from now, but we don't even know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably only a 25 to 50% increase in overall average daily trips through the area. But when people see that number, that looks like a big number until you
actually
actually
take
break
into
it.
account that the city itself is going to double in size. So as soon as you double your population, right? Obviously, so.
But I think it's important to really note the timeline. Like,
yes,
growth takes time. Like, and what we're doing here is we're planning a plan. We're not going out with bulldozers tomorrow and putting in roads.
Yeah.
This is like a 20 to 25 year plan. Like those numbers that are coming out, that 6 to 10,000 number that we heard from DKS. When I asked Kevin, I was like 6,000. I was like, that seems like a big number. Is that really what we're talking about? And he's like, well, we have to go on the conservative side. So basically, they're estimating worst case scenario if all the traffic's funneling through there and all their models are this, then 6 to 8,000 is what they were saying. Now they've said 6 to 10,000, but it's still important to note that these are worst case scenarios and that this is a 25-year outlook, and that development takes not only time, but it also takes the cooperation of property owners along that way.
Yeah.
And what we're doing here is trying to plan a plan for the worst case scenario, to mitigate the worst case scenario. So our job as long range planners and city council members, planning commissions, is to plan for the potential of full build out and how we accommodate all those residents at full build out.
Yeah.
Not necessarily what's there today.
I think it's also really important right now with that figure we got from DKS. We haven't seen how they came up with that
Yeah.
conclusion. We've asked them,
Right.
what assumptions are you making and so forth? What street system are we talking about? So I think really right now to talk about how many trips we could expect on a connection with Fisher somewhere, whichever route it takes,
Yeah.
west of 137th, is not a good thing to talk about right now because we don't know.
Right.
And I think that it's important also to consider that how Fisher or that extension gets designed, what the rest of the network looks like,
Yeah.
all that stuff is gonna have a big influence on what you could expect.
Right.
So for example, if you designed this extension to be a 35, 40 mile an hour street, you could maybe expect 10,000 and people would prefer that to Deep Bend Road.
That's not
But
my
that's
vision.
not the intent of this thing. So I think that as we go through this, we can be intentional about the results we get as opposed to them being accidental.
Right.
And
So
we don't
I
have,
think
so
that's
just,
important.
I wanna build on this one second, if you'll just
Yeah,
give me a second.
okay.
So, like what we've done in the concept plan is we decreased the cross section for Fisher from what you see currently in King City to a 2-lane cross section with a separated walking path. So that's designed to take it more from like a neighborhood collector to a local street. The other thing is that if we do a neighborhood collector, the first neighborhood collector isn't gonna start at the last place that develops. You're gonna have a neighborhood collector, probably the first one's gonna be 400 to 600 feet off Beef Bend. So you're gonna have that neighborhood collector first. And then you're probably gonna have another neighborhood collector that develops shortly thereafter at about Capulet going across. That'll probably be, if I'm looking at my crystal ball and the way development goes, that'll probably be the next one, because they'll feel the development pressure from those that have developed along Beef Bend, and that'll be the next layer that goes. And then once Capulet's across, you figure that's your neighborhood collector. That's where most people are gonna hit. Like the southern route, that could be just a local road that just has little connections and provides the connections and connectivity that we're talking about. It may not even need to be a collector status, because more than likely, most of those other alternatives are gonna pick up a good portion of the traffic before it gets down there.
Yeah.
In the eastern portion of the urban growth expansion area, which is where the kind of town center is, where a lot of the density is, we can expect those people to take Roy Rogers onto the highway.
Right.
So given the choice of going Roy Rogers onto the highway or going through, kind of a circuitous pathway all the way through the city, I mean, that's not a hard choice for people to make. They're going to
That's
be,
good.
they're going to be
Pull it.
heading down here. And again, is the concept plan, as written, has, these areas, and at some point, something might happen to Beef Bend in order to straighten that out, but these areas have a higher density. It's very unlikely that they would be going either via Beef Bend or through the expansion area, just because it's not efficient for them to do so, that they instead would be going Roy Rogers to the highway. So if we look at our existing kind of streets that dead end to this, and here's Fisher, this is a roundabout. Could we zoom in? There are a couple of ways that it could be taken. One is the closest street that exists is this one right here. That would be a slight bend. The other option would be to take this north and then to head east-west that way.
You might want to talk about street profiles there for a second. Ronnie's got his mouse on about he's on 136 right now, but he's about to go left on Sebastian. Right, Ronnie? All right, so that's Sebastian Street right there. That is a 24-foot profile. Now it goes down to Fisher. And as you can see, there's parking on one side of the road on Sebastian. Fisher is a 36-foot profile, and there's parking on both sides and still 2 travel lanes. So I just want to be clear. And now let's go up toward Capulet, Ronnie. Capulet is this one right here, and it's also a 24-foot profile that narrows toward next down at the end to a single lane, no parking on both sides. So that's a 20-foot profile between those 2 houses right there at the very corner. You guys see where it turns right there? Yep.
Yeah.
That's a 20-foot profile. It's a little narrower than the 24-foot that actually allows the parking on both on one side of the street, a little further down. Now let's go further east, Ronnie, toward Macbeth, where that connection would be. Go up, there you go. And now let's, nope, no,
Down.
sorry,
There.
down, sorry. Now let's zoom in on Macbeth. Here's Macbeth. Macbeth is a 24-foot profile, but it has parking on both sides of the street. So let's zoom in there. And as you can see, you can only get about 1 vehicle through here at a time.
Oh, that's awful.
So when we talk about funneling traffic, and we talk about traffic numbers, things like that, we also need to think about what our capacity is within the city to handle transportation and traffic throughout our city. So unless I'm condemning houses, which we're trying not to do, we need to be cognizant of the routes we pick. So
Can I ask a
right
question?
now, what we did in our concept plan is we chose routes that we would not have to condemn any property. We would not have to go through and condemn any houses. We were using existing right-of-way to the maximum extent possible and trying to minimize impacts on homes. So that was our primary goal in the concept plan.
Let me ask a question about the existing Fisher Road between 131st and the Bonneville line.
Yes.
What changes would we expect on Fisher Road in that stretch with a plan that's either A or B for extending Fisher Road? What changes would happen to existing Fisher Road between 131st and the Bonneville lines?
None to begin with. I think the worst case scenario is we had bike lanes and remove parking.
Shared bike lanes,
What?
shared bike lanes.
No, you would, I'd say worst case scenario is we add bike lanes
Why would we
and
do
get
that?
rid of parking.
Why would we do that?
Exactly. Why would we do that?
Right.
That's my feeling on it as well. But we talked about how we might be able to separate the bike route. Like once we get over here, we could say, bike route, you're going south along King Lear. So
136.
yeah, and just go down to King Lear, hit 136, and then over to Shakespeare, and then hopefully hit a multi-use pathway that goes from 131st over to 99W. So then we don't have to remove parking, right?
Well, is there anyone that's saying that we have to have bike lanes and a
No,
25 mile
no,
per
but
hour
it was
limit?
in our
Silly.
TSP, like DKS had said, when we look at a 25-year to 2045, that we might want to look at removing parking along Fisher, which both Keith and I rejected and said that's not a very good idea.
Well, I'm more radical, I didn't.
Really, you bike?
I definitely rejected it.
Yeah.
Like
And,
where did this idea that we are widening
Yes.
Fisher Road?
Right.
That's what I don't understand.
We wouldn't widen.
Why do people do we know where that's come from?
Because you're
Why-
talking about removing parking. So if you're saying you're removing parking, then people are going to think to widen the road.
Have we
So-
put that out though? I don't
Is
think
that
we
even
have.
is that in the
I've
plan?
never heard it.
I think that was just in some of the
haven't-
notes
Or
from
they thought
DKS and
on
we
the
shot
other
that
side
down.
of the wires of
So-
Bonneville, it was gonna widen.
No, it's not gonna
No, it's
widen.
gonna be the same.
And
Yeah.
isn't
It narrows.
and I just wanna be really clear so that we all are on the same page about this. Are we wanting to have the Fisher Road profile that's down towards 99, or continue the profile of Fisher Road in the Edgewater community? Because there is a little bit of a difference.
It's actually
between that.
smaller than the profile in the Edgewater community.
So we are talking about a vision of a road that is really an internal neighborhood road,
It's a
not
20
a big.
It's a 24-foot profile that we would be going to.
Can you show me? Can you show a 24-foot?
Separated. I don't think Ronnie
Do you have
has the
one?
street profiles. I might have it right
So
here. Hang on.
Fisher through here is 36 feet curb to curb.
This.
So you can have parking on both
Right.
sides with two travel lanes.
Right.
So the question we'll have, and we'll be talking about this more when you look at the TSP and consider adopting the transportation security plan eventually, is what do we want to do about east-west bike connections as well? So just as we're having difficulty figuring out where the car's going, the east-west bike connections and pedestrian connections are also critical, particularly if we think we want less traffic and people not driving all the time.
Absolutely, right.
And so, rule of thumb is at least for having a shared deal, like with Sharrows, if you folks have seen Sharrows, like in City of Portland, some places in.
All right.
Share
So I
screen.
have this. You guys can.
1,500 cars a day is kind of considered a maximum that you'd want before, really it doesn't work well to have bikes and
Yes,
cars
and
kind of mixed in that kind of environment.
That's what we're.
Yeah.
And then you want to have separate
So you've seen it?
Yeah, I'm
So,
trying to drop my copy.
you know, a couple, so there are a number of options, and the thing is, we don't even have to pick one yet, just as long as we know we have some that would work.
22,
One would
okay.
be,
Yeah.
you
Curb to curb.
eliminate
Yeah.
parking,
The other
put in
amenities
bike
are outside of that
walk.
curb to curb.
Everything works
Yeah,
according to
okay.
So
the
it's a
standard.
22.
That'd be one way. Another we're looking at is using King Lear as a possibility. And that could be to route around the place where you have the most parking demand, because once you get between King Lear where it comes up and 131st, there's a car or two, but there's not really much parking demand because people don't front on that part of the street.
Yeah.
So, you know, one possibility could be eastbound bikes go on King Lear and come back up. Westbound bikes go all the way across on Fisher. Maybe you just take parking off one side. So you have a number of different ways you can do that, or you could route all the bike traffic on King Lear. The problem would be for the westbound folks, and they'd have to stop and try and cross and go in.
And
So
you know,
the idea is to try and make this system for our concept and now master planning area, so that it's really, so parents be feeling comfortable with their kids going out on a bike and going somewhere.
Right, right.
Just like they do now in
Right.
West King City.
Right.
that's
So we
the
are
idea.
not designing a alternative commuter route
No.
to bypass
No.
99
Absolutely
or
not.
Beef Bed, right?
No.
We are, can we just establish, we are really talking about an internal neighborhood road?
Yes.
a residential.
That's
A
exactly-
residential
residential
street
Yes.
that has the same characteristics, if not narrower,
Right.
than what we have right now in
It's
Fisher.
22 feet of road.
22 feet of road
With
versus
a-
the 36
With a 10
that
to
we have
12
right
foot
Right.
multi-use path.
Right.
So we're talking 22 feet of road with
Okay.
a 10 to 12 foot separated multi-use path.
Yeah,
Okay.
but let's talk
But
about
try
that
as
for a
a-
minute.
Okay.
Just because of the words that we have seen used and the wording in the petition about widening, that's one misconception. And I'm not saying that they're lying. What I'm saying is that there's a misunderstanding about what that road potentially can be. The word expressway, thoroughfare, and all of those things are being thrown out there to describe this road,
Right.
which is absolutely not what I would ever agree to as a city councilor.
Right.
I would not.
I wouldn't either.
And we have never visualized that, and we have never talked about doing it, okay? So now we're in that situation, and look, this is complex. Everything that we're talking about, the average person won't take the time to really understand the detail level that we are talking about right now. The challenge is going to be, how do we get to the simplest form and have people believe us that we are not talking about doing those things. That is not part of the vision, and that's the best I can call it, is the vision that this council and planning commission have on trying to get an east-west connection. No thoroughfares, no expressways, no widening of the existing Fisher Road, but trying to build that grid of connection for neighborhoods, residential streets, 25-mile-an-hour speed limits, and those kinds of things are the things that we're trying to get to. But we now are in that defensive position to try to re-explain this to people who have already kind of made up their minds that, and I'll just give you an example, but I want to get back to Peter, let him finish what he was talking about. But my next door neighbor, I talked to him about the signs, and he said, oh, I signed the petition. I said, based on what? I said, you live next door to me. You never asked me any questions about it. He said, oh, it just sounded like the right thing to do because we don't want more crime in the neighborhood. That's another one of the buzzwords that's being thrown out about this extension. And I said, Tyler, you gotta be kidding me. Do you really think that this extension, that I would agree to do something like that that's gonna increase crime in this community? He said, no, I didn't think about that. I just sounded like the right thing to do. And I guarantee you that many, many people are signing that petition without really understanding what is going on. Somehow we gotta figure out how to explain, how to get people to understand what we are. Residents of King City. We've been elected to do the right thing for this city, right?
Yeah.
And why are we in competition with people who don't have any more than a personal viewpoint on Fisher Road, and our viewpoint is for all of King City? That's what we're in competition with, you guys.
Yeah.
So, Peter?
Sure, I just like to interject one thing. I think one thing that would be helpful is we're trying to, people are wanting to debate this issue before we have all the information.
Right,
Yes.
absolutely.
And so we'll never get anywhere under that kind of scenario. We're just gonna be chasing our tails.
That's right.
Well, and there's a lot of fear factor, and there's a lot of, others. We don't want the others
Yes.
to be here. We want to
So-
keep the others away. And
Right.
I just want to say one point,
We
which
don't.
is we have a real breakdown in communication and understanding. And this is something I constantly. How do we engage people and get the right information and help mend that disconnect? Because I think you're right. I think there's a lot of misinformation going around, but our public outreach, it's very unfortunate it happened during COVID. And so to me, we need to come up with some plans on how to engage people to get the information that's correct to them. And I think we can talk about that later. I don't want to take up Peter's time for
Actually, I
that.
want to take a quick second on this because I think it's really important. And I think that we all have a civil duty to fight that misinformation, that misconception. And when you see that pop up on Nextdoor, you see it pop up on all these social media sites, we have a duty as representatives of the city to correct that misinformation and kind of stymie it where it starts, right? I can't do it all the time. Ronnie can't do it.
I'm the one.
No one
I do it a lot.
person. It can't be
it can't just
one
be me.
sole
Right.
person. It
Yeah.
needs to be all of us because who's gonna? I mean, I'm pretty much gone from Friday evening through late Sunday at baseball and softball tournaments all weekend. I don't even look at social media over the weekend. And so I'm not going to be able to answer it when somebody goes off on a rant on Saturday afternoon or Friday evening and they're chatting over beers with their buddies and decide that they're going to post some obnoxious post on social media. I can't address that until probably Monday morning, but it deserves attention right away. And I think that's how we stymie and that's how we shut that stuff down is we get an immediate response and we talk to our neighbors and everyone needs to become their own civil watchdogs. And we need to stop the misinformation that's floating around. And I think that that is a problem that's floating around the entire country right now.
Well,
It
yes,
needs to be addressed.
and I don't know, look, I'm not a social media person, okay? I know enough about what it is we're trying to do. And I have to admit, I'm reluctant to get into these word battles via the internet. You know, to me, you know, it's a no-win situation as far as I'm concerned. And I'll give you an example of the way we've been trying to operate. We get an email from somebody who says, I have this real concern, and they're talking about all these negative things that are going on. You respond to that email, maybe you respond to that email, and I will always say, I want to talk to you about this. So I'll respond to that individual, give them my cell phone number, and say, talk to me. And I'll give you an example of what occurred. I had a person that wrote an email, you responded to it, I responded to it. I said, talk to me. The person wouldn't call me back. That same person showed up at the event in the park and wouldn't even tell us his real name. So what the hell is that? Okay? You confronted us via the internet, via email, but you can't look us in the eye and tell me that you are the person that I asked you to call me. But this is the kind of stuff that we're gonna have to
Call
do.
behind the keyboard.
Yeah,
Well, that's the
well,
thing,
and then
we
it
have a
comes
lot
at
of
you with a
internet
bunch of
trolls.
misinformation and
Yeah.
allegations,
Right.
and you're kind of like, wait a minute, like you're just accusing me of all this crazy
Right.
stuff. Like, I didn't do any of that. Do you actually have a question?
Right.
And most of the time they don't have a question. They just want to like accuse
But-
you of like whatever it is.
But I also think it's very easy to get into echo chambers, both on both sides about this. And what I'm concerned about, right, we see the same people on social media over and over again.
Yes.
I'm more concerned about everyone else and how do we get engagement throughout the city at all levels, right? And how do we tackle that? Now, I think I'm going to call them the opposition. I don't know what else to call them, but right now, I think they're doing an excellent job of getting their message across because they clearly are going door to door, talking to people, getting the petition signed and all of that. We don't have, very few of us have the time to do that, and we don't have the expense. If I could, I would say let's pepper the whole city with flyers and mailers and like all sorts of stuff. But we also don't have the funds for that, and sure as hell no one's gonna vote for a levy to get us more money, right? So but I do think we need to think outside of the box. I think a town hall, or we need to do something to really try to get some engagement.
Because I really feel that might
I
be
agree.
my next best move. But when you talk
Yeah,
about
sorry, Peter.
those kind, Peter, we got off on a tangent. And
No, I love
apologize.
this tangent because it allows me to say, Ronnie, will you zoom out? And I'm gonna, hopefully, because these conversations happen just time and time again. I remember the Orange Line, which is the light rail to the Milwaukee Oak Grove, was the crime train. That's what everyone was going to call it. All of these, not even dog whistling, like overtly racist things happening.
Sure.
And then now the same people who are decrying the crime train are decrying the gentrification that has happened in those neighborhoods is, oh, people are being displaced, which truly is unfortunate, but there has been no crime. And so if you could zoom out further.
I was going to ask the question on that, because there is that claim that transportation brings crime. Is there any data or statistics to support that, or is that just a baseless claim?
No, if you look at why is King City still a city? Because because I wrote your narrative for Metro and everything, I took a deep dive into King City's history. King City was absolutely on the ropes. Like, there were discussions in the late 90s about whether or not King City should disincorporate and become part of Tigard, because between measures 5 and 50, your tax base was so low that you weren't able to have basic city functions. The reason you're still a city is because of this. Like, this growth that happened is why you're still a city. The tax base from this growth is why King City is a city today. The past is the best predictor of the future. So past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. Is this an amenity to King City? 100% it is. Does this look like responsible growth? Is this a place where people would want to move with their families? Absolutely. I mean, what we are seeing is high demand for people to move to King City for a variety of reasons, but not just the people that have traditionally moved to King City, which is 55 and older, it's families. And they love it. They love the feel. They love the fact that their kids are able to get out on their bikes and bike around the city, go on walks, the connectivity. All of those things that they love, all the things that would make King City a place that people would want to call home. Why would this look any different than that?
Yeah.
So if that's successful, and by any metric it has been, so I mean, regardless of if you're looking at it from a tax standpoint for the city, that's been successful. If you're looking at it as a place that people would want to move, it's been successful. If you're looking at it from a housing density number, but still responsible growth, that metric's really good. All of those metrics have been great. So why would this be any different?
Right.
And it wouldn't. So if we're looking at what that's going to look like realistically, you know, I mean, there's some apartments around there. There are going to be apartments around there. Those folks are going to the extent that we're not all telecommuting, they're going to be jumping on Roy Rogers, and they're going to be getting to 99 that way. Because let's say we took a connector, whether it goes up like that and across, it's 25 miles an hour. So why on earth, if anyone, unless you like a laconic scenic route to the highway, which maybe some people do, why would they take that instead of just jumping on this and getting the highway? And they wouldn't. So if we're looking at how streets normally work, someone here probably isn't going to drive down to there, get on Fisher and get that way. They're going to jump on Beef Bend and go up because people want to go the most efficient route. So whether it's 4 or 5 routes through, however many routes, people are going to be on a local street until the first opportunity to get on the higher speed, higher transit route, which is this. And again, it's likely that Beef Bend is going to be straightened, and that it's going to move north. But so if we zoom back in on the Fisher Road, which I think has been the point of contention, if you could just
What am I doing?
zoom in
Fisher Road.
and just over a bit. All right, so one possibility would be that we connect Fisher to there. Another would be that we go north and punch through there. And there are places that we can probably do that without demolishing a house. Though if we're looking at, you know, maybe connecting here or lower, again, you know, what we're trying to avoid is condemning people's homes.
That's right.
So if you could just go a little bit south, the other south. All right, there we go. Okay, so
Need the touch screen.
This is
I
bad.
know, I wish I could do it. All right,
It's like backing up a tree.
no, it's just that way,
Other direction.
other direction.
Too far, too far.
North?
Too far.
Oh,
Yeah.
Other south.
North, okay.
There we go, stop. All right, so if we were to connect,
Go back.
if we were to connect Fisher across here, then the possibilities as far as getting across, one would be through there. So we would then bend the street. The one, and we think we could do that without demolishing any houses, and that would help us avoid the conservation easement. The problem is that from a topographic standpoint, there are a couple of canyons that we would need to get across, and so that's going to be more expensive. And so part of what we're going to be looking at is what's the cost of doing that, and we're having to measure that. Again, this is all about both benefits and burdens, and it's about calculating and measuring both. If we were to take this north, which I think is what some people are suggesting, and then, you know, whether it's there or even further, The problem with that, if I'm a homeowner that lives along the river, the problem with that is then you're going to have to take the sewer all the way down and hook up that way. And so those people then would bear the full cost of that sewer cost. Because again, I think that if the past is the best predictor of the future, which it generally is, then the EPA will require folks, at least on the river and probably on the other side, in order to hook up to the sewer. And there was a question.
Yeah, so on that, if the road is where the sewer line's gonna go, and you're talking about bridging over a big ravine, where does the sewer line go in that situation?
Go with the road.
Yeah.
What's a bridge?
Right, so there would be a pipe immediately
Underneath.
underneath the
Yeah.
bridge.
It would go
Like they
underneath.
go now, yeah.
Like right under the bridge?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would hang from the bridge.
Got it.
I asked Ronnie to bring up this map just so you kind of get an idea. The terrain crossing in the existing right-of-way is a moderate, it's still steep, but it's more of a moderate terrain to cross in the pre-existing Fisher roadbed. If you move to the north, one, it's steeper, so you have steeper terrain. You still have big distances, but if you go even further north, you have a double, if not a triple ravine to cross. So if you guys can look at this map, I know that Ronnie can't zoom in on it, but
Can you get up and maybe
it's
point?
pretty
Yeah.
easy to tell when we're looking at this, that this terrain here, see these lines are about 10-foot contours. So you see this is a moderate, this is really steep, and this is really steep, okay? So you see how tight those lines are? The tighter those lines are, the steeper the terrain is, okay? So as you get up in here, this is really steep, this is really steep, this is really steep, and that's really steep. This is relatively moderate, moderate, moderate. This is relatively moderate down here and up. This is steep, okay? So when we look at it, this is relatively moderate up here, but then you're steep right here and steep in here, okay? So as we start looking at where we have potential crossings, if we go up, then we have not only one moderate crossing, now we have 2, if not 3 steep to moderate crossings. So we have to be considerate about how many bridges, how many crossings, how many culverts, and what's the total environmental impact at each one of those locations. So is one singular crossing with moderate environmental impacts and moderate slopes better than multiple crossings and multiple environmental impacts at a higher level or a higher elevation, just to avoid impacts to this one neighborhood or this one easement? So that was one of the considerations that we thought, early on, is like this was less of an environmental impact than going and crossing these 3 different terrains, or even crossing up here where you still have one crossing. If you go all the way up to like B Street up here and cross, and you only have one crossing. Fisher, you only have one crossing, and that gets us to 147th where there's already a crossing.
Can you show us on there, sorry to interrupt, can you show us on there where the Columbia Land Trust is? Can you point it out?
This piece right here.
How far north does it go?
It follows this floodplain level, so it kind of goes like this, and then comes.
Ends right there.
Yeah, kind of follows this contour thing like this.
And who owns the land just north of that?
I believe this is
Residents.
Bankston and Bankston,
Okay.
and this is, I believe, someone else.
Mike, another question. The issues of erosion and the concern that over the erosion that has already taken place, because there's a lot of conversation going on about that
Sure.
during the tours.
Okay.
What route gives the owners of those properties the best chance for erosion issues to be mitigated or rectified by development?
It's a tough question because there's multiple layers to that. So first off, I think the question on addressing erosion is where's the best place to address erosion, right? And so what we've seen, and you can kind of see it in this contour, is you see these head cuts coming in, right? These head cuts even at our park, well, you can't see it, but
Right.
there's a head cut there,
Mhm.
there's a head cut here, a head cut, you know, you see these head cuts along the way. And that's because as the water levels of the Tualatin rise and fall rapidly, they go in and they cut out these little drainages.
Right.
And so, I'm not an engineer and I'm not one to tell you how the best way to address some of these are, but from what I've heard from Tualatin River Keepers is you basically have to lay open those streams a little bit and reduce the steepness of the banks,
Mhm.
and then you need to shore up the head with some sort of riprap,
Mhm.
right? So that would prevent it from further eroding. The only way to get in there and fix that is if I have some sort of network, transportation network to get in and fix it.
Mhm.
So I can't really address many of these or fix them, as they say, but I can address the impacts, right?
Mhm.
And the best way I can address the impacts is try to work with some sort of in-stream retention
Mhm.
or in-stream, well, it's similar to what was here previously. There was a double culvert with, I believe they said it was like a tire dam or something.
Mhm.
That created this little lake that was right behind the old Fisher. It was like an old farm road bed, you know, that was there. And that's what Fisher Road's basically built on. Beef Bend's built on the same thing. Basically, this whole area used to be an old farm. There used to be old like skidder trails and farm roads going through here. And that's what you had going across right here, and that's what was damming up and creating that lake.
Right.
Now, that culvert blew out a few years back, and now there's no lake there.
Mhm.
And it's just where the stream cuts through. But if we were to do something like North Bethany, how many people have seen the North Bethany in-stream retention and the environmental work that they did on the streams and stuff up there?
Pictures of it.
If you get a chance, I would encourage you to take a tour of the North Bethany site, just kind of drive through and see. They did a in-stream retention facility with a computerized weather station that controls for pending rain. So it basically will drain in advance of a pending rainstorm. So then when the rainstorm comes, it will retain the water from the stormwater runoff and then gradually release that water to control that flow and reduce erosion. Like those are elements that have been proven successful in the past on reducing that erosion, because not only is it the rise and fall of the Tualatin River, but it's also the rise and fall and the speed and turbidity of the water coming down those drainages.
So could we use roads to help divert
Yes.
rainwater? You know, so development could help improve this area, like Peachtree is a big concern from way back. That water's running off Bull Mountain, we can take wherever roads go and help divert water to where we need it to go.
It could be a consolidation of services, and when I think of trying to make this economical, like economically efficient, then I try to figure out how I can combine as many infrastructure components as possible in a single location. Because then it's more economically efficient in the larger term. And if we're talking about being able to provide affordable housing, and we're talking about infrastructure costs and affordability, like those things become really important. Where can we get the most bang for our buck? And where can we be responsible agents for our city for the future?
Right.
I have two questions.
Just real quickly, I also think it's important for people to understand that we would want to somehow help these environmental concerns. The people who own property beyond the Bonneville lines who are dealing with this, it's going to be extremely difficult for them to do it on their own, you know, without this kind of development that we're talking about, to join forces with all the services, clean water services, and all of those entities in order to, the damage has been done in a lot of ways because of the lax codes and whatever for building Bull Mountain and all of those kinds of things. But how did you get to the point where you say we can at least stop further damage through development and try to help these scenarios? And I think that's one of the things that we would really love to do.
Yeah, I think that's an important aspect, because I want to be really clear. The city doesn't have the money to do this.
That's my first question.
Clean
How-
Water Services doesn't have the money to do this.
That's where the system development charges.
Well, that's what I was
That's where
gonna say,
system
how do we
development
pay for it?
charges come
System
from,
development charges.
and
Right.
that's where we have developer resources that come into play when they develop the property, and those development agreements that we put into place before they develop that property to make sure that those elements are addressed and fixed
Yes.
as a function of their development permit, right?
Right.
Right.
So, you know, when we talk about how we're gonna get in there and fix that, well, really the only people that have the resources and ability to do that is if we develop the property.
But what about the cost? I mean, so you're having the system development cost, but you have to keep it somehow in realm of practical implementation.
Right.
I mean, if it's so expensive
Yeah.
for a developer, they're never gonna,
Right?
nothing's gonna happen, they're just
Exactly.
gonna walk away.
Yeah.
So I mean, the trick is, how do you get that balance?
Yeah, that's why we have hired all these financial wizards, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a challenge.
I have kind of a piggyback question for Peter or you. There's a lot of discussion around the Columbia Land Trust, and I kind of originally understood it as like an environmental protection kind of trust, but then recently I've heard kind of a different take on that, on the kind of reasoning behind why it was created. So can you give us a little bit of history on the Columbia Land Trust? And because I heard that it was actually created to stop the first like in the 90s, mid-90s, to like stop the growth at that point. So could you just clear up a little bit of like
Actually
what?
created in 2006.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, the agreement was actually signed the day after Metro designated, the day after what was called the Core Four, which was the representative of Clackamas, Oklahoma, Washington County, and then the Metro representative. They called that, it was David Bragdon was Metro. They called it the Core Four. They said these are the likely areas for urban reserves, and I think rural reserves weren't decided at that point. And the agreement was actually signed the next day, putting that into a conservation easement. The conservation easement is really kind of written interestingly. It allows things like cross-country ski trails. I mean, there's certainly flexibility in it. I mean, we've had conversations with the Columbia Land Trust regarding, you know, what the options are. We're looking at alternatives because one, Metro expects us to look at alternatives, and we would always look at alternatives because, as Mike said, we would like 4 or 5 connectors to go through. You know, ultimately, if we can feasibly avoid that property, we're going to.
Yeah.
Again, though, as we talk about like kind of integrated systems and paying for development, in a vacuum, without anything else, the cost of hooking up all these homes to sewer and this home to sewer as well is going to be quite significant. If it's part of, whether it's here or up or wherever the roads are, if sewer's going through, then wherever the trunk is, whether it's here or there, it's going to be less expensive for them to do it. And again, that's just, we're not suggesting that they need to hook up to sewer to punish them. I mean, that's not it at all. It's that we don't want that effluent, or Metro, the EPA, everyone else does not want that effluent flowing into the Tualatin River. And it's going to be the same thing with runoff from property as it develops. I mean, that's why they're likely going to be bioswales. And it's people that have walked these properties, and I haven't, I've just seen all the photos. What's interesting is all the invasive species that are in there. That people have used some of these areas kind of as dumps. I mean, that there's old equipment in them, there's garbage in them. And again, as we're talking about runoff and pollution and things of that nature, it's like how much of that can be mitigated if it gets cleaned up, if invasive species get pulled out, that native plants get put in, those sort of things probably are going to help. I mean, again, there are engineers that have a far better idea of how to do all this and meet all those goals than I do or Mike does, but All of this can be engineered. The good news is that a lot of this is flat, and it's really topography that dictates the SDC and the cost. It's one of the reasons why Westland's SDCs are a lot higher than, Canby's, because Canby's really flat and Westland's really hilly. We do have some topography throughout that are going to be some issues. The road, there's going to be an expense difference. We're trying to figure that out. But again, past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. For all the people that are like, what's going to go on with this growth? What's going to go on with this crime? Has that resulted in any crime?
Nope,
No.
not at all.
No, I mean, the past growth has absolutely been an amenity to the city. And this story has been responsible growth where families are able to afford a home. It's where they want to live, a safe place for their kids to bike, to use the parks, to get together. I mean, the pandemic's been challenging, but there were a lot of people going on walks. There were a lot of people riding bikes. There were a lot of people getting out, socially distancing in parks, doing all those things. None of those amenities would exist without that.
I just want to
And
add
one, oh,
if you don't mind.
Oh,
I
yeah,
just
go
want to
ahead.
add one thing while I get
Yeah,
a
yeah.
chance, because like Peter said, past practices predict our future. When we look at this map, you'll see this contour right here, right? Everything south of that map is pretty blank slate, right?
mhm.
Well, that contour goes straight across, and it comes up into here and goes all the way across to here, So if you think about this down here, continuing along here, this is all pretty much non-developable.
Right.
So these are like Goal 5 lands, park resources. We have no real development interest in those areas. So the majority of the Bankston easement, 90%, 95% of it, is in the areas that are outside of what would be considered a long-term developable interest.
Right.
So, I think our goals coincide with the goals of Tualatin River Keepers,
Yeah.
Columbia Land
Yeah.
Trust. I think our goals would coincide because our goals would be to preserve those Goal 5
That's right.
resources. But I think where we might, differ is we would also prefer to have access for the future city. So at some point in time, we'd like to see it become more of like a interpretive area, or have interpretive trails, or access to natural areas in the river, right? I think that's what we've always talked about, is having access to the natural resources and features that are there for the public and the citizenry that would be moving in there. So that might be where our paths diverge, but I do believe that a number of our goals and interests do align with those organizations, in the sense that we would also be looking to preserve the greater portion of those areas.
And that's a conversation that we've had with the Columbia Land Trust, is we've said, would you be willing to have a non-motorized bike pedestrian pathway? Because as we're talking about separating bikes from cars, it would be, I think, really nice for bikers to be able to bike along the river with a separated path where they don't have to worry about cars.
Sure.
They get a nice view. Again, people in King City love to go on walks. This would be, a great kind of peaceful walk along the river. And we don't have a commitment from the Columbia Land Trust. They haven't said that they're willing to do that. But in that conservation easement, there is that flexibility to have a trail system. So I can't say that will happen,
Right.
but it could happen. And again, these properties down here, there's a park here, these properties down here, there might be an opportunity to have that non-motorized bike pedestrian sort of path. And that's what we'd be looking for, because these are Goal 5 lands. They're not going to be developed.
Right. There is also a regional vision, right, to connect kind of Cook Park to Farmington along the river. Like, that is the ultimate goal, right, that you would be able to walk from the entire length of the river through parks and all of that, right?
So Metro has a regional trail plotted out
Right.
that
Where's that?
goes right along the Tualatin River. This is the
Okay.
Metro thumb, I call it.
Okay.
It goes just like this and down and around
Right.
and comes up and just follows the river all the way around, right?
Right.
And then they had it going right through these folks' backyard. That's not practical.
Right.
So we had reached out to Metro and said, hey, right now you've got this like pathway going right through these folks' house, like,
Right.
that doesn't make any sense, just follow River Lane.
Right,
And then you can, drop down and follow.
Right.
Because this is flat, this is really steep, again, you can see the contours, it's not practical. This flattens out down here, but these are floodplain. So our path goes like this and down and comes over.
right,
And then you have the West Side Trail segment, which starts up here and works its way down. We also would have from 131st Street, our trail system talks about cutting over here, straight across, like right here, and going down, as well as a potential kayak lounge and stuff down
Yeah.
here. So this trail here would go all the way over to tie into River's Edge,
right,
where the trail is there that connects to 99W
Okay.
and goes around that little
Yeah,
island
right.
down there. So that's all over here,
Okay.
and it would just come straight over, hit 131st, over to our park. They could hit the trail around our park, come up and over, and then, come on down, come up. This is really steep right here, but it's traversable. It might be a up and down and
Right.
across. And then this right here is kind of a bit of a struggle. This is where, we've seen dumps. There used to be an old dump in here in this drainage. And so perhaps they follow this contour down and come up in here. It's a little bit nicer. And then they can access our town center.
Do the properties have private river access right now? Like, is this?
All of these?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's
so
all
is
private.
that the big, like, it's just about, they wanna keep their private riverfront
Okay.
access?
Yeah, I mean, I would if it was my
Yeah,
property.
sure, right, right.
And, here's the thing though, is like, we're not forcing them to develop, we don't
Right, they have to
force-
choose, right, it's
Yeah.
not like we're gonna go and,
But the development pressure, I mean, our job is to come up with a plan,
Right.
right? We just plan for worst case scenario if this thing's fully built out. And we put that plan on paper. And that's our job.
Right.
And then later on, the developer comes in and they decide that, I finally bought this property for $12 million.
right,
And now I'm gonna develop my property and this is my plan. And they lay their plan on top of our plan and we say, well, we appreciate your plan, but we're gonna need a connection here and we're gonna want a connection over here and we need some sort of north, south, east, west ways to get around and I'm gonna want a walking path. And by the way, there's this park SDC, which is gonna cost you, $300,000. And then they're like, oh, well, what about if I just donate this floodplain land to you? So our job is to plan for the worst case scenario and what that's gonna cost us, right?
Yes.
So that we can come up with assessments to assess the development community when they go and build.
Right,
So that way the city isn't left holding the bag at the end of the day.
right.
All right, because
Do
we've seen development, we've seen places where they don't want to, the residents that are there currently, they see what their personal interest is at that exact moment in time, right? But what we see over the span of 20, 30, 50 years is that image changes as generations turn over. Right?
Okay, now I have something that I want to add in my concern. When we look at the potential timeline for development, okay? And I think this conversation really gets lost in the shuffle because people don't understand that nothing is going to happen tomorrow.
Right.
Okay? So if we look at this map and we're talking about what are the likely locations for the development to begin, it's out here, okay?
So Haller, Haller and Peace.
Out here. And then there's some potential along Beef Bend, right?
Yeah, so
So, but the question is, what would be the timeline for either one of those beginning developments to occur? All right, knowing all that we know and all that we visualize, what would be a logical conversation surrounding when would we be expected to break ground, turn dirt from Roy Rogers along Beef Bend, and when would there possibly be a need for a Fisher Road extension?
or connection at the.
Or connection.
Okay, so here's my looking in my crystal ball, telling you how it's probably gonna go. This property right here on the west side of 150th is currently owned by the Hasawiki family. Along with this property here
and this property in here.
Okay,
Okay, so that's all Hasawiki. They have I believe they have a development agreement with Metropolitan Land Group, who's a large developer. You have the O'Halloran parcel right here, about 154th to Elthner. They have a developer on hand and ready to go as well. There's another property somewhere in here that my understanding is Venture Properties has an interest in, so that they would look to develop as well. So my best guess scenario is right now we have water, sewer, and infrastructure right here at the intersection of 150th and Beef Bend. So when we talk about extending water, we talk about sewer. There's a sewer pump station right down here. So you can gravity feed everything from 150th to the sewer pump station, and from the Tualatin River to the sewer pump station. Everything will gravity feed that direction for sanitary. And then water, you have a main right here at 150th. So the way that I would see this is, you're gonna start at 150th and start chunking your way over. And that side's all gonna develop first. I would imagine it's gonna be this property here, because they're gonna need to extend the water line along Beef Bend. And then you're gonna have O'Halloran and MLG, and there's probably gonna be some coordination there. So my guess on that is they've been chomping on the bit now for 4 years. We've been in this process, 4 or 5 years we've been working on this since our concept plan times. So 4 years in the making. They're probably got some pretty deep plans by now, and they're ready to go. So I would imagine as soon as we finish our master planning process, and as soon as our TSP's wrapped up and everything's adopted, that they'll be knocking at our door to bring in an annexation request. So that's why it's important that we have all of our plans in place. We know what the costs are gonna be, so that we have those system development charges ready to go. We can work on those development agreements, on annexation agreements, on what that looks like, so we make sure our road networks are in place and extend it to the borders that they could potentially be in the future.
right. Let's just
So
stop
that's
right
kinda-
there for a minute, Mike.
I imagine it's gonna be this to
Okay,
begin with,
so-
for the first 5 to 10 years.
Okay,
Then
so
from there-
once we get a request like that, Peter, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm
Thank you.
headed to Scappoose to talk about their urban growth boundary expansion area. So it's UGB all
Peter,
day
you've been
long.
extremely helpful.
Thank you, Peter.
You
Yeah,
gave us some
and
great background.
again, as you hear these comments, the anti-growth comments, people talking about crime, talking about otherism,
Right,
I would encourage you to point to what you have and say, was that a benefit for our city or
Sure.
not?
absolutely.
Are those people that are members of our community or not? Because it absolutely has been.
Right,
And so people will try and, have this dystopian view of the future. What have growth areas look like in this region? They've looked a lot like that, and they're going to continue to look like that.
and Peter, at some point, I would love to have a conversation with you about the potential of doing a town hall
Oh,
on
absolutely.
this subject, okay? It may be something that we must do in order to get people in a room to talk about some very similar things, so, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and I'd say too that the property owners on that corner of Roy Rogers and Beef Bend have mentioned a farmer's market as something that they would like to see there. And
Yeah.
I think that would be, that's an example of the type of amenity that they want to provide, and that I think that other people would really enjoy. So
Absolutely.
that's really what we're talking about. We're not talking about,
Exactly.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Mike, back to the conversation, and I understand all of that, but if we put a timeline to it, even, what are we talking about here? And people need to understand, as that line of development that you're talking about has nothing to do with the Fisher Road extension at that point.
Yeah, no, I would say this is probably 20 years away.
Yeah.
I would say this area here from 150th over to Roy Rogers is probably like a 5 to 10 year build plan. That's probably 5 to 10 years before that.
Before we
actually-
break ground, turn dirt?
No, I would say they start breaking ground, but before we see rooftops.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Before rooftops are actually in place, and those sort of things. It usually takes what we've seen up in. That was a 10-year situation up on River Terrace there 10, 20 years before
Before
they
they
actually
broke ground.
started building, right?
Yeah.
But I think we're ahead of the game because we did all of our concept planning ahead of time.
Right.
And we're going through the master plan. I mean, we have pretty decent groundwork laid. And we're working toward an end goal that's an inclusive community, that's affordable, and keeping the goals of King City alive.
Right.
And I think we're working toward that goal, and I think as soon as the master plan and transportation system plan are in place, then we start entertaining annexation and, development agreements, if you will. And I think those annexation and development agreement processes take anywhere from, 3 months, 6 months fast tracking to a year. I'd say more likely it's 6 months to a year before we get through all the processes for those. So say we finish our master plan in March of 22 right now, right? Because we got delayed a little bit because the alternative stuff. March of 22 we finished this is totally hypothetical crystal ball stuff. So
Sure.
March of 22 we finish our master plan and transportation system plan. And then you have the property owners who are ready to go submit their annexation and development agreement requests. And we process those for a period of 6 months to 12 months. So by March of 23, say all of the agreements are in place, all approvals are in place, and they're ready to go. March of 23. Then it takes them time to spin up their workforce, spin up their ground forces, and get out there going. So potentially summer of 23, they're breaking ground. Summer through the year 24, they're probably extending infrastructure, and we probably start seeing the first rooftops 24-ish, 24, 25, I would say. And that's just for those portions, right?
That seems like a pretty aggressive timeline.
It is aggressive, and that's 3 or 4 years down the road, right? And that's not even addressing these units
That's
down
right.
here.
Not at all.
Now, the way that we've kind of seen that go is, it's more of a development pressure thing.
Right.
It's like, my neighbor just built 200 houses in my backyard. I'm not happy, I'm selling my property.
Right.
And then they sell their property, that property develops, and then the next one over says, well, my neighbor just built 200 buildings in my backyard and I'm not happy and I'm selling it.
Right.
So then you start seeing that growth pressure start making differences on the timeline. But that takes time.
Right.
And it takes willing property owners.
That's right. And so just one final question on this. So the what if Bankston and Meyer and all of those people never decide to develop their property, then what?
Then it just sits there fallow as a building, until
That's a perfect segue into my question.
Yeah.
Because everyone is very concerned about eminent domain. Do we have the funds to go in and purchase all of these parcels?
No.
So is eminent domain on our radar to,
Sorry, I mentioned.
I mean, as a first option, no, I don't think we can, eminent domain is there for a reason, right?
Yeah.
It is something, but is that our first option or is that our very last option?
last option.
Okay.
And,
Do we have
I
any
mean,
plans to eminent domain any of these parcels?
No.
Okay.
There are no plans to eminent domain anything.
Is that because we don't have the funds?
We have no funds.
Okay.
So,
But it is the least favorable option from our perspective
Well,
as well.
because these are
Yeah,
our
we don't wanna
neighbors,
do
and
that.
these are our,
We don't wanna-
this is our community,
we
we don't
don't
wanna
wanna
go in.
force it.
Of
we don't
course,
want to
of
do it.
course.
We don't want to do it, and we don't need to do it.
Yeah.
And we don't have the funds to do it.
And more likely than not, if and when it's necessitated, then I imagine there's going to be enough development pressure on those particular areas that they're likely going to sell out to developers anyways, would be my best guess. And hopefully, I'm retired by then.
It's kind of hard to walk away from $30 million.
Well, that's the thing, I mean, right, like, the pressure, people's
Like-
financial interest, it out-pressures itself.
That's-
But
yeah.
we don't have the funds, and we have no plan to do
Right.
it, and, it would be a last resort anyway, because this is our community.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to say that I've been doing planning work for a long time and overseeing development in a lot of different places, and I've never even heard of eminent domain being discussed
Right.
as a possibility.
Right.
And about the only time you might is if you need to get a particular utility through.
Right.
But, you know.
And there's a lot of
really,
legal
I mean,
options even
eminent
before
domain is
eminent
a very
domain.
messy
Yeah.
process,
Yeah.
and-
Right.
Yeah.
and
I just
nobody
think, I
wants
think
to
a
go
lot of,
there.
I think there's a lot of fear that, right, that the city has a vision and come hell or high water, we're just gonna go out and do it. But we don't have $3 billion to go and purchase all the land ourselves. So, you know, I think that again, it's just a lot of fear,
We're also-
which goes back to, we need a town hall
Right. to
engage with people to say, you know, if Mr. Myers doesn't ever want to sell his parcel and he wants to turn down, you know, $300 million, right? If that gets up to that price and he
Right.
still doesn't want to do it, he doesn't have to, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good segue into what do we want to do next? Because, you know, I hope that this has been educational for all of us,
Yeah.
because that was what this was designed to be. What is it we're doing, and what are the things that we are trying to accomplish? And the fact of the matter is that we want to do this with the least amount of impact to existing residents. We don't want to take away any homes from anybody. We want to do this and make it as efficient. But we've got that uphill battle because things are being talked about that just simply aren't true, okay? And if we need to figure out what we're going to do as a team in order to address the petition. Let's just start with that, okay?
Can I just back up really quick
Yeah.
and talk to Councilor Fernandez? I still want to mention that even if Mr. Myers decides that he's never going to develop his property and the Bankstons decide they're not going to develop their property, it's still our responsibility to plan
Correct.
for if those
Correct.
properties are
Right.
developed.
Yes.
Absolutely.
All right,
Right.
because
Sure.
like if we don't have a plan for when those properties are developed, then
Right.
we won't have the resources to pay for the infrastructures that we need if those properties do get triggered.
Right.
Understood.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
I still want to just put it out there. Our job is to come up with a plan.
That's right. And that's what we're doing.
We're not the developers. We're not
Yeah.
the ones that come up with the development plan at the end of the day that is going to change everything,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because plans are plans and they're fluid and they
Right.
change.
Yeah.
And as soon as the developer comes in with their plan, you know, hopefully you can hang on to some aspects of what you come up with.
Exactly.
So I-
And that's the disconnect, is I think
Yes.
people are misunderstanding the plan for, you know, here's the plan, now we're gonna build it next year.
Right.
And,
And I think you're right. People don't even understand what we do.
Right, and if
You
we
know,
want to preserve that land for park, if we
Right.
want to preserve
Right.
the Bankston land and we want to preserve the Meyer lands for a potential park in the future, then by God, we better set it aside now.
well,
or it's gonna
exactly,
get
exactly,
developed.
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, now there are two pieces to this that is really important. We've got to address the misconceptions, okay? And we have talked about almost all of them. One, that Fisher Road is going to get widened and people's homes are going to be affected on existing Fisher Road. The other piece is that it's going to somehow become an expressway or a thoroughfare and all those kinds of things. The other thing that people don't understand is the timeline for all of this to occur. The other piece to this is that somehow we're going to create this unsafe environment. People are talking about it's going to be unsafe for my children to be able to bike and ride their scooters and all that stuff on Fisher Road. All of those things are scare tactics that need to be addressed. And the other part to this, and I know this battle of this social media that we're constantly going to have to deal with, I believe that the only way we can really get to the point where people hear us is to do a town hall on this specific topic. Now, there are always going to be people, no matter what we say or do, are going to not believe us, but they want to believe, let me just say it this way, they want to believe the lie. Now, why do they want to believe, and I'm talking about what we need to address. You, and I, all are residents of King City. We're just like everybody else. We want a safe, well-maintained community. That's what we hired on to do. That's what they elected us to do. And the difference between us and the people who are pushing this petition is that they have a self-interest, a focus only on what they want to see. And the difference between them and us is that we have to look at all of King City, the future of King City, and never, never, ever foregoing the need for it to be safe, well-maintained, well-designed, and functional, and to provide the rest of this community with all the amenities that a good, well-maintained community deserves. And the future is bright. I have not seen one single post that says, you guys are crazy because King City has such a bright future. We have so much potential. The people who may agree with us, we don't hear from them. I have not heard from them who say, you people are stopping something beautiful because of this Fisher Road. They're absolutely silent. I don't know how to get them out of their shell to say, I agree with what these counselors and planners are talking about. I think it's absolutely wonderful. It's going to enhance our property values. It's going to make this the place that people want to see and want to live in and visit, to have a cup of coffee and to shop and have a bite to eat. Nobody's talking about that. Now, is it a failure on our part? Maybe it is. I'm not smart enough on this subject to figure out how to reinvent ourselves to say, this is what we really represent. And you people need to hear from us. You need to talk to us, not to an individual who's only concerned about his house on Fisher Road. We're gonna have to figure that out, you guys. We're gonna have to figure out how to get our message heard and made clear on what it is we're really here to do and what we were attempting to do. And you guys need to correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the proper way to do it is a battle on social media.
No, I agree.
You know, it's not gonna work. It hasn't
They'll sit
worked.
behind their keyboard and stuff.
And listen to me, we have a world now that has been proven to not understand civility, decorum, and the ability to communicate one-on-one in a civil way. There's some dangers in having a town hall. We know that. But I don't think we can shy away from it.
No. I think we need to have a town hall. I think we need to give people unfettered access to ask questions so that they don't feel that they're being silenced or censored or anything like that. But we also can't let everyone just talk for hours, right? But I think 3 minutes is way too short, and I think we just all make a commitment to be here for a long time and engage. And I'd like to understand how, you know, I think it's just getting people to the town hall. How do we reach everyone? How do we get people to come here? And what about our consultants? Because
When you're trying to reach the same people that he was just talking about that don't want to speak up.
I've
Right.
received one email. 500 and some people have signed the petition.
Right.
I've received
I
one
received,
email.
yeah.
right.
And the other part to this, the people who sign a petition, how many of them truly understand what they're being told?
Well, how many are local too?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's,
Well, they're taking what's in the petition as fact.
Right.
yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
And that's what we need, that's why we need to get out.
Would a roundtable meeting work where each of us were able to facilitate a roundtable of, let's say, 5 or 6 people? I've found that works sometimes.
Let me just give you a little background on where we have such a struggle, Carol. This is exactly what we did when we were doing the concept plan, okay? We had charrettes, we had individual tables, we had people assigned to tables. I had a table with Mike Meyer and some other people through in the concept plan. And then you hear people talk today, and they say, well, nobody involved us, nobody told us about what was going on. We had an individual write an email to Representative Pruzak, who claim that this is news to me about what they're talking about doing on Fisher Road. And I'm thinking to myself, how could that possibly be? But I know how it is, because people don't read what we print. We've run articles in the Regal Courier. We have put out information on our website and all these things. And it's selective reading. I'm more apt to listen to what you tell me as my neighbor about your concerns, as opposed to reading the information that gives you the detail of what's going on. All of this information about what we were thinking about doing was available to the people in the concept planning process, starting way back in 2017 and building up to the approval. And we didn't get much participation. People don't participate until they think that there's something very specific that's going to affect me, okay? And we still, even through that process, didn't really get a whole lot of folks who say, I think this is a great idea, I'm looking forward to it, I want King City to be this kind of city. And we're still not hearing from them. And I don't know how to reach them. Because when we have a town hall, you know who's gonna show up.
Yeah.
The usual.
Not King City residents.
Just a
The same people do.
Go ahead.
Just a question. So the postcards that went out concerning the gas tax, how much response did you get back?
We'll get back to that. It's on the agenda, and we'll get back to that when it's in.
I mean, I just want a number.
So far, about 200.
See, I mean, this is it. You put out something.
200,
But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
I'll explain.
No,
that.
I mean,
Yeah.
No, but it's a legitimate
thinking
question.
it as an example of
Uh-huh.
the outreach. So I'm thinking about, okay, what kind of outreach documents have I had received recently that kind of engaged me a little bit? And I would say TV F&R has been, the stuff that they put out about their bond measures and the other informational things that come in the mail, those are so readable, they've got pictures, they've got all this information, but it's in an easily digested format.
Right.
I mean, but again, what kind of budget do they have to get that kind of
Sure.
stuff out?
Sure.
But that kind of thing, your bullet points, the things you're saying to contest what the petition is
Right.
about, those are the kinds of bullet points that need to be on the documents that we're sending out.
Absolutely.
This is this, I mean, simple, concise language that catches people's attention.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And my vision of a town hall, I think we need to have very specific, just like that. These are the things that you signed a petition on. These are the things that are factual, and these are the things that aren't. You know,
Yeah.
and let's discuss those things. Why do people think that this is accurate when in reality it's not? You know,
Right.
so even if we just have the people who are in opposition, there could be benefit in that.
Sure.
And I think it's going to be another effort to try to engage the people who are silent, because we have a silent,
absolutely.
let's say it this way, a silent majority.
Yeah.
These people are not the majority that we're hearing from, right?
Uh-huh.
Let's say,
Yeah.
now, the last time I looked, the number of people who signed a petition, it was up to around 600, almost 700 people,
Wow.
okay? It's that kind of number. And I'm not a mathematician, but what percentage of King City is that?
And are they King City residents?
Yeah, yeah,
How do we know they're King City residents?
but we don't.
Right.
We don't know who they are.
I just want to say that most people are typically anti-growth. If they're already here and established,
Yeah,
because they don't see the benefit for them,
Yeah.
right? But when you have like 100 people or so a day moving to the area, those people are stuck in like overpacked apartment complexes, or they can't buy a home, or they can't get like a place that's situated in a decent school or decent school system or neighborhood or anything else. Those people are dying for housing, and they're clamoring for it, and they're screaming from the rafters and rooftops saying, I just want a house. You know? I'm tired of living in a one-bedroom apartment with my 3 kids, 2 dogs, 2 cats, whatever it is, you know? They just want a place to call home. And when you have a market that's charging $700, $800, $900, $1 million for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, for the love of God, something's got to give.
yeah.
And so I think we all recognize that there is a huge need throughout the metro region and throughout the state of Oregon for housing right now. And I think that's why we're seeing all these bills come through through the
Yeah.
House and the Senate and in our region. And so our job as a municipality is to provide for the need. And the need is there. We have to figure out how to accommodate that need. And we also need to make sure in doing so that we do it in a way that balances the needs of our current residents and our future residents, and we need to do it responsibly. And I think that's what planning is all about, and that's what we're trying to do. But I can tell you for a fact, those that are already in place, that already have their houses and are already established, aren't gonna be pro-growth. Because they already have theirs. It's the folks that aren't there yet, that are needed, that have no voice. And those are, in my opinion, those are the voiceless ones that are out there looking for a place to call home, and we also need to be considerate of that.
Right, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So if the expansion, the east-west connections, like Fisher Road, aren't projected for maybe 10 to 20 years,
Yeah.
why is it important for us to put that plan in place now? Is it an option to table it?
We have to have a plan, and we have to, in accordance with Goal 12, we have to have transportation networks and connectivity, things of that nature. It's important to put these on paper now so that we can pay for them later. If we don't put them on paper now, we have no means of enforcing it, we have no means of controlling the timeline, and we have no means of collecting the funds if the city gets burdened with one of these things. So
So the developer, Roy Rogers and Beef Ben, is gonna help start to pay for that 20 years down the road.
Yeah.
The
yes.
second question is, wait, I just lost my train of thought. No, go ahead, I'll come back to it.
Well,
I'd like to respond to that question too. I think another value of this is so that developers know what the city's intention is.
Right.
So they don't come in with a plan that's just completely opposite of what, so if you determine you need a street connection through somewhere, you want that to be public, so everybody knows that this is the expectation. So that's one of the reasons why we've got pretty good street connectivity in West King City. And we had a hodgepodge of all sorts of stuff, and but we made our intentions clear in the plan that we had, so that when developers came, you had a conversation about, so how are we gonna get these things to connect and work together? So it's a really good tool to get the outcome you wanted, as opposed to not having it there, then you get what the developers decide they wanna do.
So I thought I might follow up to that, thank you. So going back to Fisher Road, the petition, all the contention surrounding Fisher Road, I think it's very important for us to have the information, all be on the same page as to what the plan is, because I'm not 100% what the plan for Fisher Road is. We've talked about it a little bit today, but we don't really have the answers. So I think before we have any kind of a town hall, we need to know exactly what the plan is. Is it bike lanes? Is it parking? Is it 2 lanes? Is it 5 lanes? Like if we don't know the answers, then we're not ready for a town hall. So I think that's a really important piece for us to all understand is, what are we talking about? Because we don't know.
And that's what
we don't
But
know.
the,
We don't
but
know.
That's part of
my
the
only
puzzle.
counter to that, and I totally agree with you, the problem is that we're in the process to get the answers, and so I don't think, up to this point, what we've been telling people is engage with us, be in the process with us, the answers are coming, right? We don't even have anything yet, right?
Right.
We're still in the thick of it.
But if we're listening to our community members, that's why I'm here. I want to listen to them
Right.
and bring their conversations to you so you can hear them. What they're saying is, we don't want Fisher Road widened. We don't want to lose our parking because they have nowhere else to park. If you're familiar with those homes, they have an alley with a tiny garage. They can't fit 2 cars in it. There's nowhere else for them to park, literally. So if the thought process is taking away their parking, well, that doesn't make sense, right? Like, I don't support that.
I agree.
If I lived on that street, I'd be like, great, well, now what am I supposed to do?
Right.
Park on, 2 miles away and walk?
Unintended.
So
Yes.
those are the kind of conversations that we need to have together, bringing the voice of the community to the city planner so that he knows this is the problem. Like, you can't say we're gonna take away parking and put in a bike lane. How is that gonna benefit our community? It's not. Like, there's no way they're gonna get on board no matter how many town halls you have. If you're saying, I'm taking away the way for you to get to your home, then they're not gonna be okay with, they're not gonna park down at somewhere else and bike to their home because now there's bike lane. Like, that's not the way people live. They wanna be able to park at their house.
And Sean, I
So-
think, you know, what we can say, in a lot of ways, we can say what it's not. You know that we don't have a vision or a plan to widen Fisher Road, existing Fisher Road, okay? We can say that there is no plan or vision to make Fisher Road an expressway or a thoroughfare or any of those things. What our vision is for it to be the best designed residential street, community access that we can by design. And there's no reason to design it any other way.
But are we talking about altering the current road?
And that's what I'm saying.
No.
If we're not
No.
talking about
No.
altering it, then we
We're-
need to get that message to them.
That's-
Well, that's the point of the town hall.
So, but you're saying,
saying.
you're saying that the best design, but that implies that we're redesigning.
Beyond the
Beyond.
existing Fisher Road.
We're not changing the existing road.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
been fighting that since
Okay.
day one, and I think everybody's in agreement. We don't want to get rid of the parking.
That's what's most
Yeah.
important,
Yeah.
that's the message we have to get,
Exactly.
is that, if that's the reality, if
That's the
that's not
reality.
changing.
That's not
That's
changing.
not.
It's not changing.
And that's what I've been telling people, and they tell me I'm lying.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and that's
Well,
why,
okay,
and
so-
that's why we need an outlet. See, I agree with you. I think I think a lot of people, especially who have only recently learned of this plan, for whatever reason, we can discuss that forever, but for whatever reason, people who are new to finding out about this plan and their biggest concerns, part of the issue is they have nowhere to turn to go to the source to talk about it. So we need, I think, a town hall, an engagement where we can really try to put everyone in with their concerns and say, tell us what your concerns are. Come straight to us instead of, internet trolling stuff on the internet, all this other stuff. And we can talk about it. But the reality is we don't have a final plan yet, but we can't wait, I think, until it's all done, because we keep saying engage with us, and we want to give you information. So we're really caught in a catch-22 here, right? So I think we just have to really figure out how to get here and discuss it.
So the problem here, let me just explain what the problem is here. We are in the midst of a big planning process where we're gathering data and we're getting information, but we haven't synthesized that
Right,
data yet.
right.
And it's
Yeah.
not digestible or in a format in which we can present it.
Right.
So there's a void of information,
Right.
and people are filling the void of information
Right.
with the worst case possible
Yeah.
that they can think of, right?
Yeah.
So they're automatically doing a deep dive to the worst case possible scenario and the worst situation for them. And they are spreading that out to all their neighbors because that's what they are sure is gonna happen.
Could we?
Without the
get
data or anything.
some factual out there, put some kind of rolling billboard. We could put it in the lobby here, we could put it outside, we could put it at the park,
Yeah.
right? It can move around the city, so if someone wants to get some kind of fact, and tie it into a town hall.
Oh, gosh,
We
we
could
could
all
have
put banners in our yard.
we could have a find the billboard,
Yeah.
competition, and every time you find the billboard, you check in here, and then somebody can win something. But what I wanted to
It'll
say.
get factual information.
Yes, and if we see it 10 times, maybe they will change their minds. I think when we're talking about planning, there's some places in Europe that have 100-year plans. A lot of places have 50-year plans. And what we're trying to do is maybe guess at what the future might be. We might all be in electric cars, or we might be on electric bicycles, who knows?
Flying through the sky.
right,
So
teleporting.
so when it comes to Fisher Road, and people may be driving less and biking more. At that time, we take the parking off, and we have the bike lane, maybe 3 bike lanes in each direction, because there's so many. And that's the reason for a plan, because you want a sustainable community, and you have to think in a systems way, an architecture way. How is this going to affect this? Is this going to affect this? Is going to affect this? And so when you explain to people why we need a plan, it's so that our future works. Tell me if I'm wrong, Keith. Another shorthand when you talk to people is that a vehicle lane is 10 feet wide. So if you're talking about a 22-foot road, you're talking about 2 lanes and a foot on each side. And that will help you when you're going 30, 40, 50, you know, whatever it is. Freeways are 13, I think. How wide is the bike lane?
5
It
to 6
varies,
feet.
it's 5, and, you know, the current standards are more for buffers and so on, so,
Okay.
on Schultz Ferry would probably be a buffered bike lane, we have double stripe, so you have a little more room.
Yeah,
So
okay.
the total's maybe 7, 8.
But that's a shorthand that you can use when you're talking to people.
Well, and the thing of it is, and I get concerned on how much detail people really want to know. You know, I mean, you look at the basic, very basic concern: safety, crime, and loss of homes. Okay? The number of vehicles that are going to polluting my community. Those are the basic things that people keep hearing as a concern. And it's not this level of detail of how wide the street is. It's not this detail of what a conservation easement is, because I guarantee you that most of the people who read the petition don't know what that is, or what it does, or what it will do. And why is it a concern? Okay? And I don't want to overcomplicate this, but I think people need to, I don't want to oversimplify it either. Somebody's trying to.
Oh, that's right.
I don't want to oversimplify it either. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is that if we address the basic concerns, and I think people don't understand what we're here for. What are we trying to do? And I can tell anybody what I would never agree to for this city, to harm it in any kind of way. I'm not going to make it unsafe. I'm not going to make it undesirable, and I'm not going to make it put us in a situation where we, okay, thank you,
There's more coming.
that we hurt our property values. We want to enhance all of that. I'm a property owner, and every one of you are property owners. Why would we in our right minds agree to something that's going to be detrimental to this community? People want to believe somehow that because we're elected officials who they voted for, somehow is in opposition to the reality of what we want this city to be. How can that be? It shouldn't be. It can't be. So however we decide that we're going to address this, and I still believe that a town hall is the way to go, and I think that we need to have some expert individuals here who can just simply help us to explain the concerns that have been expressed in, have all of you read the petition?
No.
Okay. So you need to read the petition so that you understand what's being said and the words that are being used. The word widen is used for Fisher Road. The word crime is being used. Homes damaged is being used. And
Safety for children.
Cutting the
unsafe,
neighborhood in half.
unsafe,
Oh, yeah,
All-
cutting the neighborhood in half.
Yeah.
all of those things are being
Already
said,
is.
and none of what we are ever going to talk about doing is truthful when you look at the petition. Okay? So that needs to be addressed. Now, we will probably learn how much more we need to do via a town hall, because people need to understand. And Mike, you saw this, where a person wrote that I guarantee you that you're gonna find that this council is benefiting financially
Oh, yeah.
from doing this.
Yep.
I didn't see that.
I
Oh, yeah.
guarantee you,
Yep,
that's what this individual wrote.
yep, I guarantee you.
It's gonna come to light that you and you
Yep.
are benefiting financially from this plan. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's the nonsense that we gotta deal with, all right?
Yeah, I basically responded back and said, well, none of us own any property out there, so we're not
I'm
gonna
just
be
gonna put on the
making.
record, I'm actually losing money by being here right now. So I've been here since 9, so my billable rate is quite high, and I've lost well over $1,000. So I just wanna put it out there.
And you guys heard me
Thanks
say.
for volunteering.
Yes, And you guys heard me say that it pisses me off that people don't respect this volunteerism that's sitting in this room.
Yeah.
All of you, I don't have a full-time job, okay? I haven't had a full-time job in 15 years, so I can dedicate my time to doing this. But it pisses me off when people say that Shauna, Kate, and Jamie, and Smart, and Mark, and all of you who have full-time jobs somehow are the enemy in trying to do something positive for this city. Can't have it. And I will speak out about it. The other thing that I'm going to speak out about, and I will not tolerate, are these people saying, not in my backyard, but you can go impact these other people who don't have a voice.
Right.
You can
Right.
take out that
Mobile.
mobile home park because they don't count. I'm not
Yep.
having it.
No.
And I said that in the tour.
Yes, you
Yep,
did.
she did.
And listen, Ken Gibson has a lot of background and a lot of things that I know have occurred in this country time and time again. And I have a voice, and I'm gonna use that voice for the kinds of things that King City can't tolerate.
Yep. Yep.
You know, I love the fact that people have this property that they want to protect. But I also know that my family could never do it. We weren't given that opportunity to buy land and do that, and in fact, land was taken away from us. I know that, but the reality of it is, I love the fact that there's generational wealth in families, even though we never had that opportunity. That's real, and I can talk about that based on real experience, okay? So I respect the fact that they own it, but I also know that there are a whole bunch of people who wish they had that kind of opportunity to do exactly what we're talking about doing, and you're not going to tell me that your piece is more important than somebody living in a mobile home. Okay?
Yep.
I got that off my chest. We'll move forward. So, we were supposed to be here till 11, right?
We have yet to begin. I was thinking we might be time for like a small break before we segue. Are we about wrapped up with the growth, the burdens and benefits of growth, I think?
Well, I just need to ask this question. How do we develop the plan for our next step on this? And I need to have some conversation on what our obligation is when there's a petition like this. Is it a legal document? What do we have an obligation to do with it? Is it just a matter of record where they're expressing their concerns and we say, we hear you, we've heard you, and okay, this is what we see, this is what you see, and then we move on?
Yeah.
Or there are some legal ramifications that we need to be concerned about in terms of this petition?
It's a matter of record, really. They're basically putting their name on the record saying that they're in opposition.
Right.
Which is fine. And, you know, I encourage people to put their voice out there and be heard. You know,
Right.
they're right. They have the right to have their voice heard, and I would agree 100% with that as an opportunity to do so. But I think it's also our responsibility to make sure that the facts are
Yes.
set straight,
Yes.
right? And that what we provide is informative, factual information, and that our job is to think not only of the residents of King City now, but what the needs of the residents of King City will be in 20, 30 years, and plan for those needs.
Yes.
So while we're not the ones that are punching a road through, I think this is the biggest misconception, is there are literally people out there who think we're punching a road through tomorrow and we're gonna be condemning their parking and mowing down their houses, and that is simply not the truth.
Right.
You know, this isn't, we aren't doing it, for one, and it's not happening for 20 years or so.
That's right.
So it's just a misconception of we're doing our job, and our job is to plan for the growth that the city may or may not see over the next 20 years. But we still have to, and I've said it earlier, we have to plan for our worst case scenario. And maybe that's worst case, but in my opinion, it's like, it's almost, in my opinion, the best outcome, right? So we have to plan the best outcome for the most growth possible, right? So, and as Carol mentioned, we don't know what transportation is gonna look like in 20 years. Roads might be determined obsolete by 20 years, and we can just jump in our little flying hover pod and
Right over
little
there, Valley.
drone. I mean, we can have little individual drones that, you know, pop us over or whatever, you know? Like, we might say auto transportation is gonna be around for another 100 years, but we don't know that.
We don't.
Right.
I mean, we literally might be jumping in little tubes that shoot us downtown. I mean, who knows? Who knows what the future holds? All we can do is plan the best plan that we can do, knowing what we know today.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I have two suggestions. So one, I think we should put a quick, like, worst fears that are out in the community right now. Is crime going to go up? You know, are we is the city widening Fisher Road, blah, 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 and do like a bullet point of the worst fears and our response to them that we can put on social media and, you know, circulate and get it to the HOAs, get it out everywhere we can. And then I think we need a town hall that's moderated by a neutral party.
Yes.
And so I think we need to figure out, and my hope would be we do it in the next month,
Yeah.
right? And then we have to figure out, and maybe on our fact sheet we say, come discuss these issues at the town hall.
And I think it needs to be this focused.
Exactly.
I don't want a whole bunch of other things.
No.
But the research that I did said exactly that you need to have a neutral moderator.
Yeah.
It's not run by me or you.
No, exactly.
But a moderator who has some knowledge of what we're talking about to keep things under control and to let people understand what it is we're trying to do. So now the next question, I know Mike wanted to take a quick break before we get back, but the question that we're gonna have to ask ourselves is, do we have to have another work session to develop this? Or do we do that via an executive session or just at council?
It could just be a work session or a council session, I would imagine. It just depends on, are you talking about developing the bullet list or developing, you know, the town hall?
We gotta do all that,
Yeah.
you know, so I think they go simultaneously, that we have to have that done.
We can put, you know, I mean, I think what you would do is, like, the staff could basically pull together some of the worst fears we've heard, and maybe you guys could email me some of the ones you've heard, and we can just add it to the list, and then provide a response, send it over to our consultants and get a response, and post that up on the webpage.
Right.
I don't think we need to do a work session for that. Town hall, we can try to figure out how to schedule that, and maybe inquire about a moderator on that. I'm not sure.
I have a couple ideas, so
I mean, that bullet point, this would probably need to be a response to like the next door.
Yeah,
There's several
exactly.
different
Yeah.
threads.
I think we put it everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to Shauna's point, you know, everything that we respond to as being inaccurate to what it is we're trying to do, you have to feel confident that that is really the truth. That you have to be able to speak to that says, look, we've had this conversation. We have gotten together as a team and we have a real clear vision of what it is we are attempting to do here. And this is the truth about what we've discussed. This is the truth about what I see us doing. And these questions that you're asking, we have answers to, whether you like it or not.
Right.
Okay? It may not be popular, but it's the truth. And that's all we're ever going to deal in is the truth. We're not smoke and mirrors, we're not BS artists, none of that. And that's what they like to think politicians are. And I keep telling people, we are not politicians. We are civic servants. We are serving this city.
How do we address the lack of information? Like, we face the lack of information,
Yeah.
and they are filling the void with circumstantial conclusions that are not based in fact and not based on anything that we've seen or know.
Right.
So then we're stuck fighting yeah, exactly, fighting the possibility of something that we can't rule out or know anything
Well,
about.
I think you hit it face on. Why don't we have a plan right now? Because it's not ready. When do we expect it? You know, this time frame, right? I mean, I think we just have to be really simple and say, right? Is it really frustrating? Yes, we agree with you. It's very frustrating, right? We all want this done, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, I wish I had answers for
I
all the
wish
questions.
I had
really
the
do.
plan in front of me so I could go, let's go to page 6 where it says blah, 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 right?
I wish
But-
I had the turn data, and I wish I knew what the traffic data counts were, and I wish I knew how they were calculating those, but I don't have any of that.
We don't have that. But I think the most important is, do we have it because, you know, we don't know what the hell we're doing and it's all a jumbled mess and it's disorganized? No, it's because we're not there yet at the end. And so I think why we don't have the answers right now is important. And when do we expect to get them? And is it fluid, right? Is the deadline, because I think that's the other thing that a lot of people are stressing out about is there's a deadline when it's all done and
They're saying November, right?
they're saying we don't have our ducks in the row, we don't know anything, blah, 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 and then we have to make a decision and adopt it all, and so there's a disconnect as to what's next in the process and what those timelines are.
That's right. And a good example of this, just that conversation about 8,000 to 10,000 vehicles per day. What is that? And yeah, it's been printed. You showed it to me.
Yeah.
That is in a document. But what does that really mean?
Right.
Okay, it's not defined enough, but they are correct when they say that number is out there. Okay? I don't know what time frame that is. Is that over a 20-year period? And what I said earlier, I don't know whether or not that is 5,000 today and it's gonna grow to 8,000 in 20 years. Or is that 8,000 additional on top of the 5,000 that we see today?
Right. And we would need those traffic counts to be able to answer
Right.
that question.
Absolutely.
Right.
And this is what I'm gonna say. We need to demand from our consultants that they give us that information. We need that information going into this meeting. We do.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Tell me what that is.
Well, speaking of the consultants, also you should be coordinating with 3J and also Marcy McAnally have a lot of public involvement experience, and 3J has been doing the public involvement for the master plan.
Mhm.
I don't know if we could pick JLA's brain, Jessica, but I think we should really coordinate with them on how we structure this and how we construct a story. Because they, of course, have been involved in this as well, but I think we want to make sure that whatever this town hall is, it's coordinated with what we're doing with the plan, or
Absolutely.
it could actually make things worse if we're not careful.
And I don't want to rush into that. I don't want it to be something that we are not totally prepared for.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Maybe September sometime might be a better.
Well, whatever it takes, you know.
October.
Anybody have any idea when the end period is for the petition?
No, I don't.
Does it just run until they get to 1,000?
I don't know.
Yeah. I do think it's important that we
thinking.
let people know we're creating one.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the other thing is that, you know, I want everyone to know that we are listening to what they're saying. And a lot of people have really valid concerns, and I agree with them. I just want the answers to be based on facts and, right, I think all the concerns, I wish people would stop with the hyperbole, right? The valid concerns that they have are serious and valid, and I'm willing to listen. It's all the stuff piled on top that it's hard to take their real concerns as credible when they then divert to hyperbole and kind of ridiculousness. So we should probably figure out some way, like, let's quickly get out some facts. Let's let them know we're gonna do a moderated town hall to listen to you, and right, we're working on it. Yeah.
Do we somehow, and this is a question, is it important to encourage people who are not in opposition to attend that?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I think we want everyone to come.
Yeah, I mean, it's not,
Yeah.
yes, and typically, that's the voice that we'll hear are the people who are in opposition. But I keep talking about this silent majority. There are people out there who probably, if they really thought about it, and really thought about what Shauna talked about at the State of the City, all those possibilities, those amenities and those things, if you really stop and you think about that, now, who's gonna be here 20 years from now to take advantage of it? It highly likely won't be me. 20 years from now, I'll be 92 and I may not even remember this, okay?
I'm gonna wheel you out. We'll do a tour.
I don't know.
Well, I'm gonna take you to the ice cream shop that's down the road in the non-automated
Okay,
car.
that's all
That's my
good.
commitment to you.
But let's talk about a shorter term. You see Dave down there, and you look at me. We're handing this over to you guys at the end of 22. we won't be here. This is gonna be your thing. Dave, right?
That's right.
We're gonna retire together,
That's right.
okay?
Oh,
I mean, and I think it's important. I think it's absolutely necessary to have that youth in this process, okay? I'm not one of those people, I wish we had term limits for every elected official, including president and everything else, and especially Congress, don't get me started. Okay, but we are, and it's gonna be your thing. You know, we live in this world where people are transient. People don't commit themselves to a community for 20 years anymore. You know, I've been in King City for 15. And yeah, will I die here? I don't know. We'll see. But younger families, just like the person who lived in your house before you bought it, he was there for almost a year, maybe less than a year, and got an opportunity to go work in Seattle. House went back on the market, gone. And that's the kind of term, you're in real estate, Shauna, you see it. But that's what we're gonna be contending with too. You know, what is the commitment to a community anymore that says, most concerned about the future of this community. And when you talk about the future of this community, how many years are we talking about? 5? What's the average? People stay in houses today?
7.
7 years from now, what are you gonna see different than King City? Shauna?
A lot.
When I do, a lot of people, you know, I've spoken to a lot of people in the community that are really excited about all this,
Yeah.
but they don't want to get attacked on
I know.
social media,
Right.
right? And that's the other thing is that,
They
right?
don't want
Right? It's an echo chamber right now with some people, but they think that everyone agrees with them, and it's hard for us to say, well, no, there's actually a lot of people that don't agree with you. I talk to them, but then again, right? I'm lying, or I'm just making it up, or
Right.
whatever.
You have some
right?
ulterior motive.
Yeah, I'm getting benefits from.
And the other thing is that, you know, there are a bunch of people who just don't pay attention or even care about what's
Yeah.
going on.
Right.
Because I can still walk around in the neighborhood and introduce myself to somebody who's been living in King City for 10 years and don't know that I'm the mayor.
There's people that don't know King City is a city.
Yeah.
There's
Still think that
many people in King
Yeah.
City that don't realize
They're still
we
mad
are.
that we're raising their
Yeah.
fees.
Yeah.
And I'm going, I didn't raise your fees.
They don't know the difference
I
between.
don't know what fees you're talking
Yeah, they
about,
don't know
but
the
it wasn't
difference between HOA and city.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a quick break and then wrap this up.
All right.
We're going to modify the remaining agenda to end it with the conversation about what our next steps are for the response to the petition and a potential town hall. The rest of the agenda, we were going to talk about gas tax and all of that. We'll push that out and do it maybe at a council meeting or some future date. Not too far away, because we still have to make some decisions. So, Mike, what do you need from us? Ronnie, Mike, what do you guys need from us in order for you to start orchestrating some approach to putting out information regarding the petition and also a potential town hall?
So you all might not know it, but as city officials, we are not tuned into your Nextdoor or some of your social media splashes. So we don't always hear what's circulating in the background. So all we get are kind of like little tidbits here or there, or emails, whatever. So what I would ask each of you to do is just compile in your minds, or compile via email, put it into a list of some of those worst fears that you've heard, so that we can craft responses for them. And then just email them over to Ronnie and myself. I think most of you have Steve Faust's email as well. He's our master plan consultant. If you want to CC him on it as well, just so he's apprised of what those comments and concerns are. Bottom line, we don't see it all here at City Hall. We do our best to keep our ear to the ground, but we have certain limitations being a municipality and things that we're not capable of. The other thing I would ask is to talk with your civil patrol and get them out there defending you on social media, because I think the best way to address a lot of these social media posts is have an immediate response with factual information that debunks what they're trying to say. And just don't let it fester out there. I think that these things require responses, and it often requires sometimes a very blunt response that's like, that's false information, here's the facts, kind, courteous, factual, that's all I'm asking. And I think we can head off a lot of the disinformation that floats around as long as we do that. We'll do our best to produce responses in coordination with our consulting team. I think that Keith hit on a good point in the town hall piece. I would stress that we need to coordinate the town hall with our consulting teams. Because the consulting teams have the knowledgeable expertise in their staffing that we might not have. And even though I may be exposed to a lot of the information, I don't necessarily have the depth of knowledge that some of those planners or some of those engineers or whatever is going to have on a certain topic. So I might put on my junior law degree or my junior planner degree and dive into these things and do deep dives so I can get a thorough understanding so I don't sound like an idiot when I'm talking in public, but that only gets me so far. And it's really important that we have the person that's doing the deeper dive and has the knowledge base and the research base to answer and craft the right response.
Okay, so are we talking about the things that we already know, and if we just use the example of what the petition wording is, and we say we need answers on these specific things, the traffic volume, yes, we want them to respond to what that really is and what the time frame is, whether it's additional or on top of or whatever, or a combination of the two. Those are the kinds of things that we would want from them.
Right.
And so we need to feed them the questions that we need to have answered going into the town hall. So I agree. The other thing, Jane, you talked about, you had some thoughts on a moderator. That is going to be very important too. I don't think that moderator should be a consultant. I don't think that moderator should be one of us. It should be somebody that understands overall and can keep this thing in check and make sure that we do this in a very organized manner. So if you have some thoughts on that, let's work on that together and try to put that piece in place and feed that information to you guys, okay?
And then when you're crafting the responses, it would be nice if you can identify where some of the misinformation may have come from. So like the 6 to 10,000 or 8 to 10,000, you showed Ken a number. Some people might have seen in the blah 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 document this number.
Right.
This is what this is what's being floated, but this is the truth. Because that way we're acknowledging that there is information out there. And
Because I think you're right.
Yeah.
Is it documented information that they extracted,
Yeah.
but not fully understood?
Exactly.
Right.
Or is it something just somebody said?
Right.
Like, where did the widening piece come from?
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Where did that come from?
Right.
And where did the crime piece come from? Is there any data supporting that?
Right.
And then our response could be, there is no reason to believe
Right.
that
Right.
there
And there's no data to support it.
Right.
And I have kind of 2 points. One is with some of the more, salacious or hyperbolic kind of responses out there on social media. I've been asking people to provide sources. So like, there's a ton of stuff about Mike and his background.
Yeah.
And so I respond and I say, hey, I haven't been able, because they'll say, if you Google it, you'll find it. Okay, well, can you send me the link to what you're talking about? I Googled it and I didn't find it.
Right.
Can you provide your source?
Yeah.
So I think that's always a good question to put out on social media when people are saying lots of factual
What's your
things.
source?
Right, what's your source? Second, I'm gonna say this. In my personal capacity, I monitor the social media there's a difference between opinion and defamation. And I think it is very important that we all are diligent about, right, not stifling people's opinions and their speech and all of that, but we also take serious, actionable statements that are truly defamation. I will say this, in my personal opinion, I have not seen an actionable statement yet, but I have seen lots of statements that I personally think skirt the line. The second one goes over, I will make decisions in my personal capacity for whatever I think is appropriate. But I would just encourage you that if anyone sees anything out there that they feel goes way beyond the boundaries of what is really acceptable, then you should alert someone to that, because it's not, same with safety. There have been, especially there's kind of a crossover between some of the angst against the Edgewater HOA and the city, and there were some. I don't want to embellish, not necessarily calls for violence, but some very inappropriate activity that, if carried out, would necessitate King City Police getting involved. So just keep an eye on stuff like that. I don't want to over exaggerate, right? But
Along those
but there's
lines,
passions out there,
when
right?
when you're teetering on that line of defamation and threats, one of the key things, and I think you know this, and we all need to know this, is that you need to document this stuff.
Right.
You need to save it,
Right.
keep it, so that you have documented evidence that these statements were made. Don't just talk about it,
Right.
but make sure you document it, keep it, save it for future need,
Right.
okay? Unfortunately, that's the world in which we live.
Right.
That's what we have to do,
Right.
okay? And I agree with you, Jamie, I haven't seen anything that I think crossed that line yet,
Yeah.
but it's teetering.
There's been some that have really teetered. So.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
So I just think,
Been some fun ones.
just keep, we all can just have each other's backs.
I just, the one thing that I'll say on that is I love how people can take a partial, a news article or a partial theory or an accusation and turn it into fact.
Right.
And if anyone, what kills me with my situation is, and most of you, well, some of you were on the hiring board when I was hired, is
Yeah.
like, they asked me about like my situation in the Astoria lawsuit that I was involved with and how that all came about. And the end result of that is like I was vindicated on the charges and exonerated, and the other two people that had accused me of all this stuff were dismissed.
Ooh.
So, like in the end, it came out that I retained my position, stayed on for another year, and then sought other employment. Those two were dismissed. There was another lawsuit. There was another lawsuit later. I mean, the organization I was working for was in turmoil.
Right.
It was in turmoil before I got there. It was in turmoil as I tried to fix it, and it was in turmoil when I left. So it was just a very difficult employment opportunity, and a lot of people just got wrapped up in that stuff. So
And let me say
you learn a
something
lot
on
along
this.
those
I was on the hiring board to hire our new city manager. But most importantly, I want you guys to know that so was my wife Ramona, who is an attorney, who is a no-nonsense person, Mike, and she Googled you.
Yeah.
Okay?
She had some tough questions.
She Googled and knew all about you, and she finally said, this is the person for the job. If there was any question along those lines, you would not have been hired. She would not have supported this.
Yeah, she asked some tough questions on it,
Okay.
because there were
I
some
think we need to
personnel
know that.
things in there, there was some accusations of hostile work environment and all this other jazz. I had, witnesses that would come in and be like, It's not a hostile work environment. Like, he's a nice guy to work for. But there was an initial investigation that was all one-sided of the people that were accusing. And then that investigation was presented to a hearing board, and the hearing board heard all the evidence from both sides. The newspaper only embellished the one side on the initial report. So then everyone draws those conclusions instead of following it all the way to its natural conclusion.
Right.
Which is, what happens in this day and age. People jump to the satirical and the...
And it's an opportunity for some of those people to try to discredit
Yeah.
what it is we're doing. It has nothing to do with what we're doing here.
Yeah.
But it's the noise that people like to throw out. So you guys needed to hear this. You didn't know anything about this. And bottom line is that we have no concerns. I have no concern as the mayor regarding the credibility and integrity of Mike Weston. So.
And I truly believe that no one here is getting paid money, so
I mean, if I am, I'd love to know.
I'm sure you are all benefiting
Just lost
from
another hour, Bill.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
So
I'm sure none of you are benefiting from the program.
I doubt it very seriously. So with all of this being said, can we kind of establish a timeline for when we need to get you information, when we need to make a decision on moderator and the format of the, what do we think is most realistic for us to shoot for getting all of these things in place? I don't want too much time to go by. And as I said earlier, I have no idea how long this petition is supposed to run. Are they just going to simply run until they get to 1,000 or whatever the case may be? Does everybody now understand what our legal obligation is to the petition?
I don't think we have a legal obligation.
No.
I don't
Yeah.
think so.
No.
We don't have.
We don't. So I want everybody to understand that. This is information. It becomes a matter of record. And we are willingly and openly determined to address it.
Correct.
Okay? And it will become even more of a matter of record once we do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So setting a timeline for the town hall, at least almost half the population now is probably governed by the school year. So I would say the second or third week in September, because by then everybody's done with their vacations, etc.
Yeah.
Except for then, that's when us old folks go on vacation. After school
Understood.
is done.
Yes, I am one of those old folks, yes.
I'd like us to get our concerns to the team in a week. I think that gives everyone enough time. I'll get the moderator ideas within the week as well. And then I like the time frame, shooting for end of September, early October. But I think September, I like that better because I think, again, people are worried about this November
Right.
deadline.
Yeah.
And I do think we try to get out this bullet point kind of stuff. I'd like to see that out in like 3 weeks. I mean, I think we really need to go act fast.
Yeah.
And let them know we're organizing the town hall and,
Well,
so.
and we also no longer have a November deadline, isn't that right?
Yeah, I thought it was pushed out to the spring.
Yeah.
So, just so everyone's aware, this is a CET grant, a 2040 Planning and Development Grant is what it's called. The deadline for everything is I think it's December of 2022. So we have like a whole year of deadline time. So we are moving at a pretty good pace. I think we're well ahead of other cities on where we're at. The TSP deadline for funding, now just so everyone's clear, the managing agency for the transportation system plan is not King City. It is the Oregon Department of Transportation. So they are the agency managing the transportation system plan through a transportation growth management grant that King City applied for and was awarded. But that
I thought it was you
project,
with the pencil.
yes,
Oh,
it was me with
sorry,
pencil.
sorry.
But ODOT manages the TSP project.
Oh, wow.
We provide input, we provide our comments and concerns and try to direct how we want to see that. But ODOT has their list of criteria that they want to see met and they want to see evaluated and checking those boxes. So just so everyone's aware, it's not just us. It's not us in the back room thinking up things.
Right.
It's
And
Oregon
along
Department of
those
Transportation statewide plan.
Another thing that people love to say who are in opposition is that this is Mike Weston's plan, this is Ken Gibson's plan.
Right.
You know, the mayor and city manager are driving this down our throats. They think that we're doing this, and I have no expertise whatsoever to be able to do this, okay? So those are the kinds of things that we need people to try to understand, that this, we are asking people to plan, help us plan for the future of King City, but we're not the experts on this, okay?
No, we have a list of things that we want to see our community turn into, goals, things of that nature that we know in the long run turn into great communities. And we rely on our consultants to put that stuff on paper. You know?
Right.
I don't see any deadline on this. I don't see any.
I think the nearest deadline is going to be December 31st, 2022.
I'm just talking the change.org petition.
Petition.
Oh.
There's nothing in here that says, and I don't know what what their policy is on how long.
Yeah, no, I think for the planning, 2040 planning development grant piece, the CET, I think 2022 is the deadline for that, expending all that money. The ODOT timeline is up. That ran out June 30th. And actually, I think they got an extension, the DKS group got an extension till July 31st to finish or put in the last little pieces of their document. So Keith and I have been hitting DKS for pumping them for information on when all this stuff's gonna be ready. But we are still waiting.
So I think clarifying what some of our road post goals are, like our goals, you know, versus critical deadline, drop dead dates, is, I think there's some conflating of those two, right? And so I think just clarifying for people what's the expectation of timing, what's our wish / expectation, and then what are the actual drop dead date deadlines. And so I think that will help people too, because there is a real sense of pressure, in my opinion, in the community to get the opposition and get it to us because of this idea that November is the drop dead deadline.
Right.
And
Well, they're thinking November's the deadline to get you comments because they expect you to evaluate and, host a public meeting in December to
vote.
render a decision
Right.
on adopting the master plan.
Right.
Which, hopefully, December was our target goal.
Right.
December 31st was our target goal to adopt our master plan and transportation system plan.
Is that date movable?
Yeah, I think it's already been moved.
It's
It's
already
been moved to March?
because of the new
Because of
scoping.
the scope analysis. Well, I don't think it's been moved officially yet because the
Okay.
scope isn't official yet.
Right.
But we're working on the scoping for that alternative analysis, which will push back the final adoption date.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's no reason why we can't get all this stuff knocked out, like all the base work, informative planning work and all that stuff. Like, that we have the data to project how many units we're gonna see in 20, 30 years. We have the data to project what that's gonna relate in transportation numbers. We might not have it, but the consultants have this information. So they can extrapolate from that information, the baseline data, what's gonna be needed for sanitary, what's gonna be needed for stormwater, what's gonna be needed for transportation, what's gonna be needed for active transportation, walking, biking, all that jazz. All those elements that we should be able to project, the consultants should be able to project. So there's really no point in delaying or stalling out all the planning work that goes along with developing a 20 or 30-year plan when really you have all the data already there, and all you're gonna have to do is run a couple analyses on a couple of street or road networks to figure out if there's other alternatives and what those alternatives look like.
And I'm gonna say it again. You know, when I look at the kinds of conversations that have been going on, when I look at what the petition says, I think it's pretty superficial what people are looking at. You know, the deep dive that we've been talking about and that level of detail, I don't know if it's meaningful to them. But we have to back up every statement that we make with some information if somebody wants to take a deeper dive. That's what we have to be prepared to address. That's what the consultants need to be here to address, okay? Then you have some people that are very thoughtful, like the email that you got from a person who lives in Rivermead. He has some very specific questions about what this means, and he appreciated your response.
Yeah.
You know, it was a good question with good answers, not emotional, not about we don't want to do this, but this is something I need to understand. And there are many people out there who can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, but we need to be prepared to address it and to answer it in those terms where people can understand it. We are going to learn a lot. We're going to learn a lot about the kinds of questions that come up in a town hall type environment. Maybe they're going to be complex, maybe they won't, but we need to be prepared. So I think we're heading in the right direction. You know, and I'm going to chastise you guys, all of you, before we end this meeting, because we sometimes are exchanging emails that says, this is what we have seen, and I would like to hear your thoughts before I move forward on something. And sometimes I don't get any response from anybody, and my feelings are hurt, okay? I say, okay, this is what I'm thinking, and this is what I've said, and I'd like to know your feelings on this, okay? And I don't get any response. You know, we need to, whatever opportunity, that line of communication between us, I'm not asking you to vote on anything, because we can't do that. And we can't have city business conducted via email and all of that. We all understand that. But sometimes I need your input. I need your thoughts. So when I send you something via email, please read your emails. And if I don't get an email response, my next step is to text you, because I think you see text more than you see email. Now, that couple of days that I took off when it was 115 year, my wife and I were celebrating our 48th anniversary over on the coast, I shut down completely. By the time I got back, I had 258 emails, okay? And I understand how that works. But let's be cognizant, for this team, I'm talking about planning commissioners and city councilors, let's make sure that we are at least saying, I got it. Or, yes, I have some thoughts, or no, I don't have any thoughts. I think that's going to be important as we move forward,
I'll
okay?
just knock on your door.
Yeah.
My favorite neighbor.
Me too. I also heard you hand out ice cream, so I'm gonna come knock on the door
I
too.
did that
so.
too, yeah. I did that
Oh,
too.
you do? I will tell my kids.
Okay, so are we kind of clear on where we're going to go with this? We need to get you some information over the next week or two, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to drive toward a September town hall, moderator type selection, and then we will get back and kind of talk this out before we make any other moves.
Yeah, I think my only concern is the town hall. We just need to coordinate with our consultant firm, make sure.
Yes, that's
Make sure
important.
we're coordinated there.
What
Won't
kind
do
of
without it.
moderator are you looking for? I mean, you said somebody knowledgeable probably about planning processes in communities, or?
I don't know.
I don't think we would
Judge.
even need to be, they would need to be knowledgeable about moderating.
Yes,
Exactly.
how to moderate.
Yeah.
And just let's say it this way, how to moderate in today's world. Okay? Today's world, what I just talked about a little while ago.
Yeah.
Civility, decorum, respect. That's what a moderator has to be able to deal with today, right?
Yep.
So, okay. I can't tell you guys how important this is. This is wonderful, and I'm glad for every one of you who took time out from your busy day to be here today. Is much appreciated, and I just have the greatest respect for the volunteerism that we see in this room, and people need to understand what we're here for and how important this is to us to do it right, to get it right. And I don't think they understand it. I don't think they understand how important that is to the residents of King City who is representing them. Okay? That's important for them to understand, and I hope that we can continue to educate people on that, because I think that's going to be super important as we move forward, okay? So thank you guys. Any final comments from any of you guys? Shauna, start with you.
Nope, I don't have a final comment.
Thank
Okay.
you, thank you.
Kate? All right. Jamie? Mark?
I just want to say sorry, I came in late, I had a mix of the timing, so sorry.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. You people keep using the excuse, I have a full-time job. No excuses.
But this is great, I mean, it's good for us to maintain our focus
Yes.
and not get distracted, because a lot of distraction take us away from what is beneficial to the residents of King City.
Yes.
And that's what we're here for, to keep that focus, to keep that stability, if you will. And so I'm glad we're doing this, so thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Dave? You good?
Good.
All right. Mark?
No, I'm good.
All right. Laurie?
My only question is, where will this town hall take place? Here?
Here?
Think here? I don't know if we're,
There's
you
no
think it's big of
There's
a,
no space.
I don't know,
I-
if you think?
Well, I don't know.
Clubhouse.
Maybe the, maybe the clubhouse? Yeah.
Clubhouse, right?
I was waiting for that request.
Yeah. That'd be a good idea.
See, the thing is,
Or we can do it in the parking lot, I mean.
yeah, if we,
Plus virtual.
is there's a virtual aspect that has to be part of this. We can't do it any other place. I
Right.
mean, I don't know where that would be.
Why do we have to have it virtual?
I don't know. I
Just have it
mean,
in
because
person.
virtual is, you know, every town
It's gonna be a
hall
lot.
that,
20.
I mean, it's becoming the thing that you must
Yeah.
do in order to reach the community.
Yeah, I think we have to have it virtual. I mean, I wanna have it in person, but allow people to access it
Yeah.
virtually.
But can't we have
A hybrid.
them come and do it?
Well, yeah.
There's no two-way communication with that
Well,
camera.
that's, okay, that's a point that needs to be
That's the
understood.
Yeah.
If we pack this room and we have overflow out into the,
Lobby?
lobby, we have the ability to do that too. I would much rather have the room packed with people with standing room only. You sign up to speak, you step up to the podium, and you do your thing. So, I'm not afraid of doing it.
Sign or fill out a question card.
Yeah,
I
question.
think we
card.
just need to keep an eye on COVID and, all,
Yeah.
you know, all
No, I
that.
understand.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
not breathing on each other.
I understand, I
Yeah,
understand
we're
all
not ready to
that.
start breathing on each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to figure that out, but
Yeah.
I say it needs to be on our home turf.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my
We
feeling,
can
but,
fit a good number of folks in here and in the lobby, but
yeah,
Take the tables away.
yeah.
Okay.
I
So,
don't think we'd be able to maintain 6 feet separation on
right, right.
I think it'd be better to do it in a bigger space because of COVID,
Well,
just saying, I just
We're,
want to put that out there.
we're gonna have to figure that out. I don't know where that would
Yeah.
be though.
it. Yeah,
Clubhouse.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We'll keep,
The one's in charge.
We can get 100+
Yeah.
chairs in there.
we could also go to neutral territory, go to Southridge High School or Tiger High School or, you know.
Deer
and
Creek?
I think we're at
Deer
50 or
Creek.
60. I think we're 50 here and probably
I don't know if
30 or 40 in the lobby is
That's
probably
true.
our max. So I think we're under 100 for this.
Ernie will love you for crowd control.
Well, let's
Yeah.
table, I gotta go, so let's table the protocols and we can kinda keep working on it and then,
You want to work our way around and
Yeah, yeah.
with comments?
yeah.
Carol,
Oh, thanks for the donuts.
that's the first donut I've had in many years. And I'm apologizing,
Jan.
Jan, okay. Jan,
Yeah,
you have anything?
I'm sorry.
Do you have anything you wanna close with?
No, I'm thinking about the moderator. I'm thinking of a couple people I might know.
Okay.
So just to approach them and then if anybody's interested, I'll connect.
Okay, you see what you've gotten yourself into, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for volunteering. I appreciate it.
My last statement is just that we need to be cognizant, not just of our current King City residents, but also the future potential King City residents who don't have a voice and are going to want those services like a library, a rec center, parks, natural spaces, access to those things. So as we start planning those things, we need to be thinking of that.
So community benefit plans will be part of,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you mean civic uses, like the library and stuff like that?
yeah, but I mean, you know, but community benefit
Yeah,
with the development.
that's the
With the
master plan.
development will be part of this master plan.
Yeah, so we have to add those into the master plan so that they're accounted for, and then we have the system development charge to dole out to the developer when they come in with their plans, so that we make sure that we have the revenue sources to pay for those civic improvements and those other elements and services.
Right.
Okay,
Cool.
thank you, team. Ronnie, you have anything? Okay, all right.
Move to adjourn.
I
Oh, we
hope-
don't have any
I
motion.
hope this was a
I
benefit.
retract.
And I think we need to do this more often,
That'd be nice.
you know?
Yeah.
To have this kind of joint conversation, because I think it's important. We're learning as we go along. None of us have done this before. None of us have been down this path, okay? So we're gonna figure out how to do it the best way we possibly can. We are. We're bound and determined to do that. And I think we can do it. We have the right team, the right people in place to make this work. And that's not, when I say make it work, I'm not talking about what I want. I'm talking about what the city of King City needs. And people need to understand that. So we're good. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.